Jiutian sipped his tea while gazing at the colossal object outside the window. It was already the 8th day, yet people's discussions remained restless. Jiutian found it tedious, as this matter had made his work difficult these past few days. Since there's no impact, just leave it be. If anxiety is useless, what meaning does it have? Jiutian, he was neither special nor important, not in any aspect. Among the over 7 billion people on this planet, he was merely the most ordinary and insignificant human. He had just turned 24 not long ago, and he had spent those 24 years in the most ordinary way, graduating from the most ordinary school, finding the most ordinary job, doing the most ordinary things. So when that thing descended, Jiutian was only slightly surprised. But he soon realized that humanity couldn't even slightly influence its will, so he stopped paying attention. He was just an ordinary person. If there was something that the entire human race could do nothing about, then for an ordinary person like him, that matter was utterly meaningless. A meaningless thing is not worth anyone's attention, no matter how eye-catching it is, even if it stirs up a tidal wave across the world. Though he said that compared to Jiutian's indifference, the frenzy sweeping the planet was greater than anything in the past millennia combined. Because of that thing's existence, nearly every discipline, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, history, biology, physics, the occult, had some theories and discoveries that needed reinterpretation or even outright rejection. Countless media crews and short video creators converged from all directions toward 12,800 locations on Earth. Facing such a massive influx, law enforcement agencies like the military and police for the first time appeared somewhat helpless. Some governments tried to legislate to stop the influx toward the areas where the objects existed, but the result was that every prison and detention center was overflowing, while violent crime in those regions rose exponentially. The city where Jiutian lived was relatively better, but the streets were still jammed with all kinds of people. He who had never used the anti-theft lock before now had to lock his door every day after seeing strangers pitching tents on the lawn in his neighborhood. There was still about an hour before the end of his shift. Jiutian watched the giant object suspended over the city, casting shadows in the sunset, wondering if his commute home would be smooth today. He had also thought like others about the changes this thing might bring to the world, but he still felt powerless. In fact, he found those who came to watch ridiculous. If this thing were harmful, wouldn't they be the first to suffer? Is the thrill of joining a crowd really more important than one's life? Having few contacts, Jiutian didn't feel like checking his phone. Besides the overwhelming barrage of push notifications about that thing, there were only messages from his mother and a few close friends asking about his well-being. Since it was in her own city, Jiutian's mother worried about him immensely and urged him more than once to take leave, and he himself didn't take it seriously, reasoning that even if he returned to his hometown, there would be nothing he could do if something truly happened. That remark earned him a 30-minute scolding from his mother. Jiutian wasn't just making empty remarks, he truly had the right to say so. 8 nights ago, the colossal object resembling an upright manta ray pierced the clouds, illuminated by moonlight. Like a man-eating shark quietly surfacing from the dark sea, it descended slowly over the city under the terrified gazes of countless people. The giant head of the manta ray spanned nearly half a district, but its body tapered down to just a few meters. Such a drastic shape on any object would seem ugly, but on that thing it was suffocatingly harmonious. Whether by design or coincidence, its tail, just a few dozen centimeters above the ground, landed right in front of Jiutian, who was taking an evening walk after dinner. The object's surface had a matte texture, its color somewhere between black and gray, hard to define, like the color of clouds under moonlight at night. Everyone around fled in terror, but Jiutian felt only surprise and confusion. He reached out to the tail and gently touched it. Jiutian may not have known that his touch was the first direct contact between this civilization and another's creation. The sensation on his palm was something he would never forget for the rest of his life. The surface looked matte, but when touched it felt as smooth and warm as jade, yet with a distinct granular. The next moment he was swept away by the panicked crowd. Even long after the strange, yet fatally attractive sensation lingered in his mind, impossible to shake. At the moment he placed his hand on the tail, even though he didn't know what that thing was, Jiutian felt a primal instinctive threat from the depth of his being toward its existence. After struggling to get home that day, Jiutian felt utterly exhausted. He didn't even wash up and fell asleep on the bed. Having not dreamed for a long time, he had a strange dream that night. In the dream, the giant object silently watched him, and he could do nothing but stare back at this uninvited guest. The word stare was not quite appropriate because the thing had no eyes or anything like that. But Jiutian always felt as if he was being watched by it, so he gazed back until he woke up. The feeling was so real that the next morning Jiutian couldn't tell reality from dream for a brief moment. And such dreams continued in the following days with no sign of stopping. 7 days ago, the area around the object was sealed off tightly, and everyone's transportation and daily life encountered various obstacles. The existence of that object spread to most parts of the planet via the internet. 6 days ago, after communication between all governments, they quickly confirmed the number of these objects, 12,800, evenly distributed across all human settlements with identical appearance, proportions, and dimensions. At the same time, 1/10 of the planet's population began moving toward these 12,800 regions, as if some magnetic force was summoning them. 5 days ago, faced with increasingly prevalent marches and protests, a country in the midst of an election to court votes took the lead in releasing preliminary research on the mysterious thing that had descended on the planet. The result: nothing gained. According to the highest precision military-grade measurement instruments currently available within an error margin of 1.5 micrometers, humanity still found no difference among these 12,800 colossi, meaning they were all identical in appearance. Scientists speculated that even if human civilization and technology advanced for another 1,000 years, they could not produce something of this caliber. At the same time, all detection instruments currently owned by humans, including radar, sonar, and infrared, could not detect them. To every instrument, this thing was like air, which was why the planet's defense systems had shown no reaction when it descended. The only way to observe them was with the naked eye and through touch. 4 days ago, since no harmful effects had occurred for 3 consecutive days, some cities with the unknown objects began to gradually unseal, including the city where Jyotian lived. Some extremist groups and religious sects began preaching miracles and divine punishment. 3 days ago, Jyotian City experienced material shortages and panic buying. Food prices tripled and drinking water prices nearly quintupled. 2 days ago, the discussion about the unidentified flying object continued to surge, and all attempts at guiding public opinion nearly lost control. 1 day ago, 1 week after the unidentified flying objects descended on Earth, casualties from those shot for approaching them in America exceeded 100. Protests intensified, and small countries in South Africa and Southeast Asia saw regimes overthrown. In a few hours, it would be the 9th day. Jyotian glanced at his watch and began packing up to leave work. The streets were still packed. Jyotian struggled to push through the crowd, wondering what might still be left in the supermarket. Luckily, he always cooked at home and habitually kept his fridge full, but it could last at most another week. Back on his familiar street, his familiar neighborhood, now filled with unfamiliar people. After confirming the lock was still intact, Jyotian opened the door and went inside. His life was unlike that of most young people. It could even be called boring. Perhaps because Jyotian had few hobbies, recreational activities were essentially foreign to him. The only thing that could be called an interest was reading. So Jyotian's home was filled with all kinds of books, from classics to obscure essays. Reading was one of the only 2 pleasures in his leisure time. The other was playing games. Jyotian was somewhat obsessed with open-world and strategy games. In his words, these games and books shared one commonality: recreating a world. He would be fascinated and amazed by the extraordinary imaginations of those creators and authors. But that didn't mean he had a problem with the real world. After 20 years in this world, a little novelty was welcome. And he did have some talent for gaming. Jyotian flipped through a book while a live stream played on his computer. Chaotic and lively scenes that failed to capture his interest. Suddenly, a line popped up in a chat window. Could this thing be for colonization? I feel like those things are just collecting planetary data. Objection. Jyotian started typing without thinking. If you're colonizing and find a resource-rich island inhabited by monkeys, what would you do? If I were merciful Idaho, drive the monkeys away or put them in a zoo? If cruel ID, just kill them? Wouldn't you send a few probes to scout for a few days first? Probably not. They're just monkeys. Even if they developed a Stone Age civilization, they're no threat to me. That's the point. To a civilization of that level, we are the monkeys. Jyotian typed seriously. Just as monkeys cannot understand humans, our attempt to understand a higher civilization is laughable in itself. How pathetic. Humanity becomes monkeys in an instant. It's normal. We were never special. Our arrogance hinders our perception. Giordano Bruno Secco Diascoli Servetus. What happened to those pioneers who shattered humanity's self-centered arrogance? They were burned at the stake. Yes, burned at the stake. Jyotian chatted idly. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. The person on the other side of the chat was one of Jyotian's rare kindred spirits, a close friend from high school onward, also deeply interested in astronomy and geography. After the brief conversation, Jyotian opened a few niche forums. The once-dead astronomy section had exploded like bamboo shoots after rain in recent days. New discussion threads reached 99 replies in no time. He clicked on threads from familiar usernames, but they were all various conspiracy theories. The original astronomy enthusiasts were buried by the flood of ordinary people and influencers. Genuine astronomy posts were pushed down by endless discussion threads. Some people on these forums had become quite familiar with Jyotian over time. It was a small circle. Some even sent private messages complaining how no one read their posts when the community was small, but now that it was crowded, the bookworms still couldn't get a word in. Jyotian had to comfort them one by one. The entire world over these few days was like a boiling hot pot. All kinds of ingredients tossing and tumbling excitedly on this planet. On the bright side, the planet radiated unprecedented vitality. On the dark side, the order of the world was gradually crumbling. Rubbing his temples, Jotian decided not to think about these issues anymore. After all, if the sky falls, there will be tall people to hold it up. An ordinary person like him was just a screw in the vast machinery of civilization. The world would still turn with or without him, so fretting was pointless. He opened the curtains and looked outside. The lights were still bright. Would he be able to buy groceries tomorrow? The fridge was almost empty, and there was no end in sight to the chaos. He felt sleepier than usual today. Jotian yawned. It was already the 9th day, and those things remained motionless. No one knew how long they would hover there. They must be consuming something while hovering. If there is consumption, it will eventually deplete. Even if its technology far exceeded current human understanding, it couldn't break the law of energy conservation. That meant it would eventually do something. When in a passive position, the best strategy was to wait and counter. His mind was foggier than usual. Lying in bed, Jotian felt he could fall asleep quickly tonight. But lately he was reluctant to sleep, because since that thing arrived, the strange dreams had lingered tormenting him for 8 days now. The 12,800 mysterious objects on the planet hovered silently above various places, as if they had been overlooking this land for millennia. If this continued, perhaps humans would gradually adapt to their existence, just as they had countless times before, even forgetting their origin, accepting them as part of this world and their lives. After struggling for just a few minutes, Jotian still fell asleep. After all, both reading and thinking were mentally draining. Today's dream came quickly. In the dream, the giant manta ray silently watched him. He had observed it in his dreams for 8 nights and remembered nearly every detail. Jotian had compared this object in his dream with the real one. They were identical. Although the subconscious can record many things, Jotian seriously doubted whether his subconscious could record such a complex object in such detail and feed it back into his dreams so realistically. If not, then all these inexplicable things might be attributed to that celestial visitor. Another familiar dream, but this one made Jotian uneasy. Yes, this time the feeling in the dream was even more vivid than before, as if it were real. He who had previously been unable to move and could only observe even wiggled his finger. Receptor X26852 logged in. His chaotic mind struggled to fully concentrate in the dim surroundings, which only amplified his inner panic. Just as he was about to feel irritated, a cold, emotionless voice resounded around him, penetrating directly into his mind, as if bypassing his ears. Jotian was startled, but held back his emotions, saying nothing, uncertain if he was still dreaming. Although he could clearly perceive his own consciousness, he still wondered if this might be a lucid dream, as such things were theoretically possible. Confirmed login. Now providing a situation briefing. Jotian remained silent, but his focus sharpened noticeably at these words. Subject X26852. You are currently located within one of the 19 heritage ships built by the Z-Line Confederation's greatest city-state, Morosha, designed to prevent the severance of civilization's legacy. You should be informed that this is not the true heritage ship, but a naturally derived heritage tower specifically designed for early cosmic civilizations. The purpose of the heritage ship and tower is to select sparks worthy of inheriting the great Morosha civilization and to cultivate living forces capable of confronting the universe's mortal enemy, the Abyss. Currently, your physical body is not present in the tower. It is a unified virtual form uploaded after your soul was extracted. A total of 12800 heritage towers have been deployed on this planet, each hosting approximately 6500 souls. All virtual bodies are based on original appearances, but strength and speed are standardized. As the voice spoke, Jotian found his body could move freely, and he instantly felt an unprecedented a simulated body. Jotian thought, alright, so it's an alien tool that pulled my soul in. What about my original body? Still sleeping in bed. Ridiculous. Next, I will state the criteria for the first round. Please listen carefully. The voice ignored Jotian's thoughts. First round, the 652893 Earthlings in this tower will undergo the most basic heritage transmission, lasting 30 Earth days. Those achieving 70 heritage integration will be considered qualified and proceed. The unqualified will have their memories erased and be forcibly ejected. The first round begins in 15 minutes. Use this time to familiarize yourself with the environment. Each of you has a smart bracelet on your left arm containing all the knowledge you can access. Briefing complete. Good luck, inheritor. May the stars be with you. With that, the voice faded away completely as if it had never been there. Jotian's focus finally returned fully. He looked around and found himself inside a circular hollow space resembling a cave. The hollow space was enormous with a longer depth. A cylinder extended up from the dark bottom, and Jotian's countless deep red tendrils coiled around the cylinder as if a huge creature was clinging to this spot. Not far away, he could see the cave exit connected by a small path from the column top. But a translucent semi-spherical barrier encased this area, preventing him from approaching. Around the cylinder was a bottomless circular abyss. Jotian guessed the barrier not only blocked the exit, but also prevented accidental falls. Although the voice claimed everything here was virtual, who could be sure? After a brief shock, Jiutian quickly adapted. He was a highly adaptable person. He looked at his left arm and saw a guard-like object. Pressing a button, a seam of light appeared, and a tangible projection materialized before him. Compared to the earlier vague descriptions, this scene struck Jiutian as far more astonishing. Whether real or dream, the scientific classification frames and data on the projection were beyond belief. Individual data: name Jiutian, male, height 91. 2 Komish units, 181. 93 centimeters, weight 25. 63 Shiro units, 72. 84 G specialties. Individual ability values. Diseases. Seeing entries he himself wasn't even fully aware of, more detailed than a medical checkup, Jiutian's expression turned peculiar. Potential risks for liver and colon cancer. I thought I was fairly healthy. He randomly touched a large category labeled Heritage Tower on the interface, and a flood of text emerged. Heritage Tower established in the 25th Moin era. Jiutian quickly read through all the information about the so-called tower until a line of red text appeared. Insufficient access rights. Jiutian let out a long breath. Though he regretted not being able to view further details, at least he wasn't completely ignorant now. The place he was in was called the Black Cavity, a basic learning tool for citizens of the so-called Great Civilization of Morosha. Every legal adult could use it infinitely by their identity. Above the Black Cavity, there were higher-level categories, but those were reserved for nobles and royalty. Jiutian couldn't learn specifics. Only 1 month for us, but back in that civilization, citizens could use it infinitely. Such an advanced civilization still has monarchy. Jiutian muttered to himself. He checked the prominent countdown on the main interface. Less than 5 minutes left, and a subtle unease grew with. Ever since these things descended upon Earth, many realized that uncontrollable events were inevitable. While ordinary people talked, and the entertainment industry celebrated, world leaders were frantic. In the worst-case scenario, if these things were hostile to humanity, did humans have enough power to resist? The answer was despairing. Indeed, some aggressive nuclear states had detonated large-yield nukes at several towers, yet failed to even shake them. If the earlier descriptions were true, then on the 9th day after their arrival, almost all humans on Earth were absorbed into the towers for the so-called selection. According to the unknown voice, these things bore no hostility toward Earth. They generously offered inheritance. Even the unqualified would have their memories erased and be sent out. Even without hostility, the method was too gentle. But that also revealed the confidence behind the heritage civilization, like giving new tricks to monkeys on an uninhabited island, always under control. Taking a deep breath, Jiutian decided not to dwell on it. The countdown was under a minute, and the true nature of the so-called heritage was about to be unveiled. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As the countdown ended, dense text exploded onto the screen projected from the bracelet. The moment he glimpsed the content displayed on the screen, Jiutian's attention was utterly captivated. Contrary to his expectations of encountering abstruse knowledge that demanded strenuous focus, his concentration instead became intensely riveted on the text materializing before him. Jiutian stared fixedly at the screen, and as time slipped away, the entire space seemed to fall into a profound silence, broken only by the occasional swish of his fingers scrolling to turn the page. This time the silence within the dark cavity lasted an unusually long while, as if the projected screen possessed some enchanting power that drew him in. Finally, at a certain moment, Jiutian began to feel mental fatigue. His gaze wavered, and he inadvertently caught sight of the time displayed in the corner of the screen, jolting him awake. I have been. Jiutian's eyes widened. I have been reading for 6.5 days, eh? Though he cherished reading, he knew he had never been capable of reading continuously for nearly a week without a break. In truth, human attention has its limits. Generally, an hour and a half marks the peak of concentration. In rare moments, Jiutian could enter a special state. In that state, his mind and body did not need to deliberately execute neural commands. Every action flowed with effortless grace. In that state, the efficiency of his actions and reading greatly increased, and his focus was immensely heightened. Psychologists call this state flow. Yet, even in a flow state, Jiutian's limit for reading did not exceed 24 hours, and more often than not, the flow state was disrupted by various external factors. But here he had unknowingly read for nearly an entire week. It was simply incredible. Could the time display be? It felt to him as if only an hour or two had passed. What astonished Jiutian even more was the content of the inheritance. While reading and contemplating, he had no spare energy to ponder the significance of the words. Only after stopping did he realize the sheer terror of this knowledge. This was not the arcane tome he had anticipated. Instead, the inheritance used plain and profound language to paint a magnificent and world-shattering picture, overturning the 24 years of his understanding of the cosmos. To Jiutian, this content was more educational and entertaining than most popular science articles on Earth, accessible even to middle school students. In the world described by those words, all sciences, physics, mathematics, biology, chemistry, astronomy, geography, psychology, and more, could be unified into a single grand theoretical discipline. So-called genes were depicted as a kind of programming language. Life according to its preset program grew into various fixed forms. Only during reproduction could two different sets of genes combine, giving rise to minute differences. Generally, evolving a new species required billions of years of accumulating these subtle differences. Occasionally, a programming bug would appear during evolution, giving birth to a gene with drastic changes. This was mutation. Whether through subtle evolution or mutation, these changes typically occurred during the gestation of life. Theoretically, once life was born, such changes ceased barring external forces like radiation. Radiation could disrupt the genetic program language akin to implanting a Trojan horse. In most cases, this led to extreme malignant bugs destabilizing the gene. Thus, irradiated organisms gradually developed cancers, organ failure, and other pathologies. This inheritance recorded a method for postnatal genetic programming, enabling benign changes to one's genes outside the state of gestation. In Juxian's understanding of this inheritance, what the initial selection required them to do was to genetically program their current bodies as much as possible. To achieve this, they needed to obtain the aforementioned radiation. Of course, this radiation was not the violent kind like nuclear radiation. In fact, such intense radiation was rare in nature. Yet humans are constantly exposed to radiation. Most of it is gentle cosmic radiation weakened by the atmosphere. Among it, the most energetic and beneficial to humans is solar radiation. Beyond Earth, solar radiation remains a violent force carrying immense light and heat, scorching the planets that orbit it. On Earth, however, solar radiation is filtered layer by layer by the atmosphere, becoming the optimal energy source for nurturing life. Even ordinary Earthlings know that occasional sun exposure boosts metabolism and health. In this inheritance from a higher civilization, the utilization of the sun was elevated further, not merely as energy, but as a medium for self-programming one's genes. In the inheritance, methods of genetic programming were distilled into hundreds of formulas. These formulas catered to various individuals, allowing them to choose different evolutionary paths based on their preferences and talents. But Zhou frowned at the dense text on the screen. There are too many formulas. He had nearly finished reading the main body of the inheritance, with only theoretical introductions remaining. Even after such focused reading for 6.5 days, Zhou had only barely managed to skim through the entire inheritance, a testament to its vastness. According to the earlier introduction about the dark cavity, those Morosha citizens could directly infuse this knowledge into their brains through some transmission method, but we have to read it ourselves. It seems there are still differences in treatment. Zhou mused to himself. Unbeknownst to him, the physiological structure of the Morosha citizens' primary race differed greatly from Earthlings, so even if the dark cavity had this function, he could not use it. Of course, memory infusion technology could save a lot of time. With transmission, such a volume of knowledge might take less than 2 minutes. Shaking his head to dispel distractions, Zhou focused his energy on the section introducing the evolutionary formulas. According to the inheritance, evolutionary paths could be broadly divided into 3 categories: intellectual evolution, physical evolution, and spiritual evolution. The ultimate goal of these 3 evolution methods was to enable oneself to withstand mystic force, achieving a heritage rate of 70, which was considered passing. These 3 broad categories were further subdivided into many subclasses. For example, intellectual evolution included mechanical research evolution, elemental communication evolution, and so on. Physical evolution included adaptability evolution, multi-limb evolution, etc. In contrast, spiritual evolution had very few paths, totaling a handful: telekinesis evolution, illusion evolution, precognition evolution, and curskill evolution. Which one should I choose? Zhou head ached at the multitude of formulas. Forget it, I'll try them one by one. I don't understand many anyway. With a resolute decision, Zhou first looked at the intellectual evolution category. This was also the category where he understood the fewest formulas. It's the disadvantage of lacking education, Zhou sighed. In school, he had been quite unbalanced in his studies. For humanities subjects, he could easily score high without much effort, but the sciences were a complete blur to him. As his friends put it, his talent points were too skewed. Coincidentally, most formulas in intellectual evolution required a foundation in the sciences to understand, making it the least suitable category for Zhou. Finally, from over 100 evolutionary formulas, Zhou picked one he could barely comprehend. The ultimate effect of this formula was to enable one to understand and master abilities related to plant symbiosis. The effects included allowing researched organisms to parasitize thermal or cold weapons, granting the weapon self-awareness, and greatly increasing its power. Zhou activated the arm guard and began simulated evolution. Generally, as long as sunlight was present, Morosha citizens could directly use these formulas to evolve. However, due to physiological differences between Earthlings and Morosha citizens, humans lack the small tentacles on their foreheads that Morosha use to sense and absorb various radiations, necessitating a medium for humans to use these formulas. The arm guard was invented by the Inheritance Tower specifically for non-Morosha primary races. With it, even creatures not of the Morosha primary race could use evolution. This was why the Morosha called themselves great. The ancient sages who created these wondrous formulas not only aided life's evolution, but more importantly, they were inclusive. They were not selfishly suited only for their own race, but for the vast majority of races in the universe. This was true greatness. A warm, tingling sensation emanated from the arm guard. Jiu Tian felt a comfort akin to soaking in sunlight, instantly understanding that this was the tangible sensation of solar radiation being absorbed within his body. Jiu Tian concentrated, attempting to control that strange sensation. Lacking prior experience, his method of control was clumsy. Time passed bit by bit. Finally, the warm feeling that had only spread through his arm began to extend toward. The extension was slow at first, then grew faster and faster, moving from arm to shoulder, from shoulder to neck, and finally reaching the brain. This was only the beginning of evolution. Upon reaching the brain, the solar radiation, following the method described in the formula, began to travel between blood vessels and nerves lingering at the synapses. It gradually permeated the innermost layers of neural structures, reaching the DNA helix structure within the nucleus of the nerve cells. This was the most critical moment: genetic programming. It was a long and complex process requiring meticulous adherence to the formula's instructions step by step. A single mistake would lead to direct failure. Human DNA is a double helix structure. With the arm guard's ability, one could use consciousness to apply solar radiation to the DNA, enabling nanoscale manipulation. In the universe, DNA structures are incredibly diverse. Human DNA with its double helix is already extremely complex, but some special organisms possess DNA with triple or even 9 helix structures. Of course, such beings themselves exist at very high levels and dimensions, making further evolution extremely difficult. As the formula progressed, Jiu Tian began to feel mental fatigue. Maintaining intense concentration for a long time is challenging, especially for Jiu Tian, who was not adept at intellectual evolution. At a certain moment, it felt as if a bang sounded. A healthy nerve cell suddenly began to atrophy. Then the warm energy receded like a tide, leaving Jiu Tian with an inexplicable sense of emptiness. Did I fail? Jiu Tian was not discouraged. This failure was expected, though it came sooner than he had anticipated. I tried for 45 minutes total, Jiu Tian thought, glancing at the time on the arm guard. Progress: 56. This was the formula Jiu Tian had deemed most suitable within the intellectual evolution path. Yet after 45 minutes, he had only achieved 0.56 progress, with no discernible change to his entire body. If he continued, Jiu Tian felt he could apply the lessons learned and press on, but he did not have the time. The entire initial screening period is 30 days. I spent 5 days just reading through the inheritance. Making progress on the intellectual evolution path would also take days, and it's an uphill battle. Jiu Tian shook his head. Let's continue with physical evolution. Drawing from his experience in selecting formulas for intellectual evolution, Jiu Tian quickly found a suitable formula for physical evolution. The ultimate effect of this formula allowed the human body to arbitrarily graft limbs from various other creatures without immune rejection. Imagine a person with a tiger's claws, an eagle's wings, a buffalo's horns, a rhinoceros' hooves. Well, it sounded strange, but it would probably be quite powerful. After a brief rest, Jiu Tian refocused to control the solar radiation from the arm guard. With prior experience, this evolution was much easier. After 1 hour and 10 minutes. Bang! Jiu Tian winced in pain as he saw a wound on his arm. Intellectual evolution failure only atrophied one cell, but physical evolution failure actually causes injury. He was somewhat surprised, but the wound healed quickly. Jiu Tian was not astonished by this, as it was a virtual body and rapid recovery was to be expected. Progress 0.96. Jiu Tian checked the screen. Better than intellectual evolution, but still not ideal. Did he have no talent for evolution? Jiu Tian frowned in thought. Though just an ordinary person, he was not willing to concede that he was inferior. In truth, Jiu Tian's grades were not outstanding, but that was due to his severe academic imbalance. In humanities alone, he was confident he could compete with the top students. An avid reader since childhood, he had long realized Earth's insignificance. In the vast scales of time and space measured in billions, both this planet and humanity were but specks of dust. Human machinations, intrigues, and rivalries were nothing more than dust swirling, unable to affect even a fraction of a planet's orbital trajectory. Whenever Jiu Tian thought of this, he felt a sense of powerlessness and despondency. Now he had glimpsed a higher world, a door leading to the cosmos, an opportunity to break free from the shackles of being a speck of dust. Yet he found himself unworthy. Previously, how he lived did not matter, for compared to the vast universe, human endeavors were mere child's play. Now faced with a chance to enter a completely different, more radiant world, he found himself unable to grasp it due to his own lack of talent. An unprecedented feeling of unwillingness and negative emotions surged within Jiutian for the first time. He took a deep breath, barely steadying his mind. Patience had always been his forte. This was a rare moment of losing control. Don't panic. Isn't there one more evolutionary path? Jiutian looked at the spiritual evolution option on the screen. Taking a deep breath, he opened the page for spiritual evolution formulas. The Earth revolves around the sole sun of this galaxy, and since sunlight can only illuminate one side of the planet, the Earth perpetually experiences both day and night simultaneously. As for the moon, it always presents the same face to the Earth. This means that without the aid of probes and satellites, humans observing from the surface can only see the moon's near side, while its far side remains forever hidden, a phenomenon known as tidal locking. At the very moment when all of humanity was immersed within the inheritance tower, something on the far side of the moon, it took 9 days to collect approximately 8.3 billion soul samples, and they have now experienced 7 more Earth days, haven't they? Slender fingers tapped rhythmically upon the throne. Mona, what is the current progress of the inheritance of life on this planet? Currently 35 of Earth's population has chosen the path of intellectual evolution, 60 have chosen the path of physical evolution, and 5 have chosen the path of psychic evolution. The one with the highest progress is a human who chose the path of intellectual evolution with an inheritance rate of 48. His chosen formula is the attribute mastery direction with a projected final inheritance rate of over 95, placing him in the 6-star genius category. A faint white apparition materialized beside the throne, and a voice identical to that from the black void resonated. Yet this time devoid of any coldness, it was filled only with tenderness. Oh, an intellectual evolution ratio of 35. The figure on the throne sounded somewhat surprised. It seems the people on this planet are exceptionally gifted in intellect. What was the intellectual evolution ratio of the last life-bearing planet we encountered? 5. Or was it 3? 94. The Tayans had very low aptitude for intellectual evolution. However, due to their worship of the sole deity Lothrian, they were fiercely martial, possessing immense talent in physical evolution. Within the same time frame as the Earthlings, 326 individuals achieved an inheritance rate exceeding 50 on the physical evolution path. Such a race is too extreme. The figure on the throne shook their head. For a civilization to travel far, it must maintain a balance in its racial talents. Wisdom and strength are both indispensable. What about the physical and psychic evolution paths? Currently, the individual with the fastest progress on the physical evolution path among Earthlings has reached 39, with over a dozen others exceeding 35, placing them in the 4-star genius category. As for psychic evolution, the highest progress is 11, and the chosen formula type is Curse Kill. Telekinesis. Jiutian opened the psychic evolution formula page and carefully examined the 4 formulas: telekinesis evolution, illusion evolution, precognition evolution, and curse kill evolution. After a long deliberation, he clicked on the telekinesis formula. It's entirely different from the methods of intellectual and physical evolution. Jiutian gained some understanding. If classified by academic disciplines, intellectual evolution was a quintessential combination of physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Physical evolution was a blend of biology and chemistry, while psychic evolution was a fusion of psychology, neurology, and philosophy. Telekinesis, illusion, precognition, curse kill. Jiutian gazed at the 4 formulas. Precognition and curse kill were relatively unfamiliar to him, with their descriptions leaning mostly towards idealistic theories. In contrast, telekinesis and illusion were theories he recognized at a glance, rooted in psychology and materialism. Consequently, Jiutian spent more time deliberating between these two. Unfortunately, there is only enough time to choose one evolution formula, Jiutian said as he clicked on the telekinesis formula. Compared to the more ethereal illusion, he preferred the tangible control. A warm sensation spread once more from the arm guard, but this time the solar radiation did not envelop a specific part of the body for evolution. Instead, it uniformly covered his entire being. For intellectual and physical evolution, successfully programming a specific body part, or even a key cell, would cause that programmed focal point to assimilate the surrounding tissues, much like a computer infected with a virus, self-replicating and copying, until complete coverage and evolution were achieved. For psychic evolution, however, the bodily transformation was considerably simpler. According to the inheritance descriptions, the body was merely a vessel for carrying psychic power, and the formula's modifications to the body were solely to better contain that power. The most crucial part of the psychic evolution formula was not the physical transformation, but the psychic transformation. The method for achieving this psychic transformation was surprisingly familiar to Jiutian. It was meditation. Thus, the evolution method of the telekinesis formula was relatively straightforward. The first part involved physical transformation, and the second part entailed strengthening psychic power through meditation. Of course, simple was only a relative term. In reality, this evolution path lacked the concrete steps and guidance found in intellectual and physical evolution. The mere concept of meditation was enough to baffle many, which explained why so few chose the psychic evolution path, and why its progress lagged far behind the other two. Truly, the path of psychic evolution was too vague, and many could not even enter a meditative state. In fact, the theory of meditation had emerged early in the history of Earth civilization, with records of it found in all four great ancient civilizations. According to Earth's theories, entering a meditative state was meant to achieve transcendence and sensation with the goal of complete mental focus. However, the specific method of how to enter this state was never described. Even those who had experienced a meditative state found it difficult to articulate the process. Consequently, many theories on Earth deeply doubted the existence of such a state, excluding it from the realm of science. In the far more advanced civilization of Morosha, the reality of the meditative state had been proven and incorporated as an essential pathway for psychic evolution. Yet, even so, the description of how to enter a meditative state remained remarkably vague, relying more on individual comprehension. Jyotian closed his eyes. This evolution process was far more prolonged than the previous two. The path of psychic evolution went more smoothly than he had anticipated. The moment he touched the meditation guidance, he was instantly immersed in various visualizations. For a formula that emphasized theory so heavily, Jyotian's talent was truly awakened for the first time. Compared to the other two formulas that guided you step by step, the psychic evolution formula leaned more towards guidance. This reminded Jyotian of a book titled Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Having loved to fantasize about the starry sky since childhood, Jyotian, in his meditative state, conceived fantastical imaginations he had never before envisioned, some of which even astonished him. What is called meditation is actually quite similar to entering a flow state. In such a state, the mind can be expanded to its maximum potential, though the meditative state is deeper. And thus immersed in evolution, 10 days passed by unnoticed. On the 17th day since the inheritance tower opened, a long, silent, dark cavity finally stirred with sound once more. Huff! Jyotian exhaled slowly and opened his eyes. His pitch-black pupils now seemed tinged with a hazy moon-white radiance flickering wildly around the irises. I've been asleep for 10 days. Jyotian finally snapped out of his meditative trance. He used the word asleep because those 10 days felt more like a dream. Guided by the formula, Jyotian underwent an unprecedented meditative journey. In that state, his mind seemed stripped of all emotional perception, leaving only rational thought and self-awareness. He casually tapped on his inherited arm guard to check his spiritual evolution progress. Individual name Jyotian. Spiritual evolution direction telekinesis type equation. Current progress 68. 97. Nearly 70. Jyotian raised an eyebrow. This was even better than he had anticipated. I wonder how this ranks among everyone else. He was quite satisfied with this progress. Unfortunately, since this evolution selection method didn't allow communication with the outside world, none of the inheritors knew their relative standing. The only sentient being who knew sat on a throne on the far side of the moon. Luo, there's some data worth noting. My. The man on the throne opened his narrow eyes. In inheritance tower number 7011, an inheritor has completed 68. 97 of telekinesis type spiritual evolution in just 10 Earth days. 10 Earth days? The man called Luo was taken aback for the first time. And telekinesis type? Yes. I reviewed his evolution data. This inheritor's spiritual body is exceptionally suited for the spiritual evolution path, and his displayed talent is 6-star. What about the other 6-star inheritor? That inheritor has reached 97. 84 in the attribute mastery category. If he reaches 100 within 3 days, he can be recognized as a 7-star inheritor. One potential 7-star inheritor, one 6-star spiritual evolution inheritor. This planet never ceases to surprise me. Luo narrowed his eyes, his slender fingers gently stroking the armrest. Back on Earth, billions of inheritors were immersed in the thrill of evolution. Their physical bodies were either asleep, strolling through the streets, or at work, but their spirits were uniformly drawn into the inheritance towers on the 10th day. Their fates were now being observed by the man on the throne behind the moon. Including Jyotian, humanity remained utterly oblivious to this truth. Despite confusion and uncertainty, the vast majority of humans began their evolutionary attempts. They didn't know what it meant or what destiny awaited them. This was merely a fixed arrangement by a higher dimensional civilization for Earth, and the still weak Earth civilization could only follow this path. On the 19th day of the inheritance towers opening, the first human achieved 100 inheritance rate, the one Luo called the 7-star inheritor. At that moment, the inheritance tower internally elevated her priority to the highest level, though she herself remained unaware. By the 23rd day, more humans on the physical evolution path reached 100 inheritance rate. On the 27th day, Jyotian finally reached 100 in his spiritual evolution path. immediately after he opened another illusion-type inheritance. Yes, there was no rule limiting anyone to a single inheritance. Switching to another after reaching 100, finally on the 30th day, all inheritors automatically awoke. A cold, clear voice echoed in their ears in their familiar language. Recipient number XYXXXXX, congratulations or regrets on failing to meeting the first-round selection criteria. I hereby announce your eligibility for the second phase, or your removal of inheritance memories and expulsion from the tower to be executed immediately. What? My inheritance rate is only 68. Give me more time. What the hell? Finally, 30 days cooped up here is driving me crazy. Haha, I barely made 70. At this moment, the fates of millions diverged. Billions of people began to awaken in the real world, their initial confusion turning into sheer horror. Those quick to react confirmed with those nearest them and realized this was no dream. They had truly spent 30 days in the so-called inheritance tower. No, that's not right, someone stammered, pulling out their phone. It's not 30 days. Real time. Only half an hour has passed. In an instant, the internet and all communication channels exploded. Something beyond human imagination had occurred. The extraterrestrial construct had used some unknown means to plunge everyone on Earth into slumber, including those in the world's most secure, safe houses. During their sleep, everyone genuinely felt they had experienced a full 30 days. But upon waking, they found only half an hour had passed in real time, and most memories of those 30 days were irretrievable. Such a jarring disparity could instantly shatter anyone with weak psychological resilience. Nearly all major global organizations convened emergency meetings simultaneously. Soon they discovered something: some people had seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. Andrew. Where's Andrew? The UN Secretary General banged the table in fury. He's the head of the crisis response team. How can he be so negligent? The entire world descended into chaos. Watching from his throne, Luo merely smiled faintly. For him, accelerating time in the consciousness space to ensure efficiency was a trivial matter. The inheritance towers scattered across Earth weren't just for assisting evolution, they also served as signals. The null signals they emitted could easily create cognitive barriers in sentient beings. The physical bodies of all who passed the first stage remained on Earth, but the cognitive barriers made it nearly impossible for the awake to perceive them. Even if those individuals stood right before them, their cognition would register them as something else, a protective measure by the inheritance towers for their inheritors. Regardless of the chaos outside, Zhou Tian felt none of it. He calmly stared at the numbers on his arm guard screen. Individual, name Zhou Tian. Spiritual evolution direction telekinesis type equation. Current progress 112. 83. Spiritual evolution direction illusion type equation. Current progress 47. 21. Inside the cave-like circular chamber, the protective barrier that had enveloped Zhou Tian had receded, revealing a narrow path connecting the cylindrical top to the exit. A door-like opening now appeared in that direction. Without overthinking, Zhou Tian stood up, adjusted to his simulated body after a month of inactivity, and walked toward the light at the entrance. Whether this was a dream or reality, a gift from aliens or a conspiracy, his only choice now was to keep moving forward. Receptor X26852. Almost at the same moment Zhou Tian stepped out of that door, the cool voice echoed once more in his ears. First, congratulations on passing the first stage of inheritance and becoming one of the 265823 second stage inheritors remaining in Inheritance Tower No. 7011. Next is the explanation of the second round selection criteria. Inheritors who achieve an inheritance rate of 70 have gained considerable cognition of the universe and themselves. How then can this cognition be transformed into abilities of practical significance? The answer is the Mystic Force Seed. Simply put, the Mystic Force Seed is the pathway that converts your cognition into reality. As your understanding of the universe and yourself deepens, this seed will absorb your cognition and thrive, feeding back into your abilities. This is a brief introduction to the evolutionary pathway. What you must do in the second stage is use every possible means to acquire and fuse with a Mystic Force Seed within a period of 7 Earth days. After becoming a second stage inheritor, your access permissions are elevated. You can learn the details through your smart wristband. Explanation complete. Good luck, inheritor. The galaxy is with you. With that, silence returned to Zhou Tian's ears. He tapped his wristband, and indeed some previously inaccessible data was now readable. The term Mystic Force had appeared many times before, but due to insufficient permissions, Zhou Tian couldn't grasp its specifics, only knowing it resembled something like ability manifestation. Spotting the striking new entry Mystic Force Seed, Zhou Tian swiped to open it. The Mystic Force Seed is a bridge between the universe and living beings. The various energies hidden within the universe are boundless, but because life forms in their nascent state are too fragile to contain them, even though various radiations constantly pass through their bodies, they cannot be retained. The Mystic Force seed is a medium created for life forms that have achieved a 70 base inheritance, enabling them to communicate with the universe's abilities. A life form achieving a 70 base inheritance rate proves that its body has been modified to a level capable of accepting cosmic radiation. At this point, the life form is essentially ready to use Mystic Force. If at this moment the life form obtains a Mystic Force seed and fuses with it, they will acquire corresponding abilities. This seed will absorb the life form's insights into evolution and grow while the life form's abilities become increasingly powerful. The primary source of Mystic Force seeds is when Mystic Force masters condense their power into seeds at great cost. Later generations can become Mystic Force users by acquiring and fusing with them. It must be specially noted that once a Mystic Force seed is fused, it cannot be separated unless the user reaches the level of being able to condense a new Mystic Force seed themselves. The introduction to the Mystic Force seed ended there, and Zhou Tian frowned. Although the explanation had clarified the source of Mystic Force, he felt an underlying unease. Reaching the level of condensing a Mystic Force seed. Such a strange phrasing. And since the seed cannot be separated after fusion, doesn't that mean this selection hinges on the speed of finding a Mystic Force seed? I wonder what those seeds look like and if they're randomly distributed, Zhou Tian mused. Whoever edited these words must have padded the text. Could it be that these compilers are paid by word count? Though the explanation seemed flawless on the surface, Zhou Tian instinctively felt some ambiguity. After standing and pondering without clarity, he refocused his attention. Only now did he begin to survey his surroundings. It was a cavern-like space with stalactites, draperies, and stone flowers forming pillars and walls. These structures felt similar to the tower's material, not like stone, but more like metal. About 10 minutes had passed since he left the cave entrance, but he hadn't encountered anyone else. Could this selection also be conducted individually? Before Zhou Tian could fully assess his situation, the entire cavern was bathed in a dazzling red light. A diamond-shaped crystal with 57 facets materialized abruptly in the center. This is a... Zhou Tian stared in astonishment at the crystal. Could it be? Was this the legendary Mystic Force seed? Encountered right at the start. He couldn't have imagined it would appear in such a dramatic fashion. The piercing red light reflected in Zhou Tian's eyes was blinding. The next moment his hair stood on end, and he instinctively hid behind the nearest stone pillar. 4 or 5 dark figures flashed from unknown places, moving so fast Zhou Tian's eyes could barely track them. Their target was the same, the red glowing diamond in the cavern's center. In terms of position, Zhou Tian wasn't far from the center, about 100 meters, but the protruding stalactites and draperies would make running there difficult. The dark figures appearing from nowhere were incredibly agile. Some were farther, some closer, but they darted through the stone formations like nimble monkeys, reaching the red light in just 4 or 5 seconds. How can they be so fast? That was Zhou Tian's first question. Even without the stone obstacles, covering hundreds of meters in 4 or 5 seconds was impossible. Then the figures made contact. Get lost. A roar erupted from one figure as he kicked another nearby. The targeted figure twisted his body unnaturally to dodge the kick, but the move caused him to fall behind. Do you want to die? The lagging figure growled through gritted teeth, then lunged forward again. Perhaps some had noticed Zhou Tian, but no one cared. He had no intention of competing, especially since the red light faintly revealed more figures hidden among the rocks. 5 figures reached the diamond crystal in succession, then began brawling. How is this? Zhou Tian was increasingly shocked, even more than by the crystal's appearance. He had seen fights before, but never such a display of raw power. One sent another flying over 10 meters with a punch, some twisted their joints and muscles to impossible angles to evade attacks, others withstood heavy blows without flinching. One punched so fast it was invisible, another lifted a nearby boulder that seemed to weigh nearly a ton. By Zhou Tian's standards, these feats were beyond normal humans. They were like superhumans from movies and comics. Yet this was unfolding before his eyes. Despite the shock to his worldview, he forced himself to accept it. If these people were fellow Earthlings, the only explanation was the evolution formula. Zhou Tian immediately tapped his wristband to check his own information. As expected, Zhou Tian realized. Individual data: name Zhou Tian, male, height 91. 2 Comey units, 181. 93 centimeters, weight 25. 63 Shiloh units, 72. 84 kilograms, specialties: psychic sense, basic, individual comprehensive ability value 32618, intelligence ability value 31, physical ability value 277, mental ability value 277. Note: ability values are the sum of individual capabilities. Example: physical ability value is a composite of strength, speed, modification, degree, etc., not a reflection of any single ability. Diseases. Gazing at the new figures on the screen, a glimmer flashed in Zhou Tian's eyes. The specialties field had been blank before, now it listed psychic sense. Though unspecified, Zhou Tian knew it must serve a purpose. The brawlers likely possessed physical-related abilities. Indeed, his senses were sharper, or rather stranger. For instance, though he hadn't seen or heard, he knew someone was hiding behind a rock behind him. It was an indescribable feeling. He just knew. The hair-raising sensation when the figures appeared might also be linked to this ability. So his unease while reading the data wasn't unfounded. Zhou Tian pondered. The struggle ended quickly. The victor was the most aggressive fighter who finally knocked back the resilient defender, repelled the others in a short burst, snatched the crystal, and fled. Perhaps exhausted or demoralized, the remaining figures, panting and exchanging glances, silently retreated into the shadows. For various reasons, Zhou Tian had little desire to join the fray. He simply observed, witnessing the first clash among the initial batch of human evolvers. The red light dimmed as the victor moved away. Zhou Tian sensed the surroundings. His ability, unlike the others' offensive ones, might reflect a different evolutionary path, but it put him at a disadvantage in this group selection, which was highly unfavorable. Had he rashly joined the fight, he might have been eliminated swiftly. It seems the evolution in this inheritance tower is far more complex. Though he didn't obtain the Mystic 4 seed, this first struggle gave Zhou Tian a preliminary strategy for the second stage. After ensuring his hiding spot was safe, he chose a less crowded direction and quietly slipped out of the cavern. Finding the exit of the karst cave was not difficult. Even using the simplest method of walking around the entire cavern would not take much time. Before knowing what would happen after fusing with a secret power seed, it was better to be cautious. Although not explicitly stated, Zhou Tian knew that mutual slaughter had already unfolded somewhere. For ordinary people living in an era of peace, killing someone is a difficult task. However, under the current circumstances, most individuals had their physical abilities enhanced to a certain degree, gaining far more formidable powers than before. This power was an authority, and authority breeds desire. Moreover, this inheritance space lacked the constraints of real-world laws and morality. No one could predict what might transpire. This was precisely why Zhou Tian was reluctant to face others, especially after realizing he could not accomplish such extraordinary feats as those individuals did. After all, only a fool would agree to an unfair competition. Although he could sense an improvement in his physical constitution at this stage, Zhou Tian was far from being able to twist his joints or shatter stalactites with a single punch. This might be due to his evolutionary path. Relatively speaking, Zhou Tian possessed keener senses than before. Of course, this also meant that if he faced those people, the consequences could be dire. If the physical evolution path quickly manifested in enhanced strength, and the spiritual evolution path was reflected in heightened sensory perception, then what about intellectual evolution? Zhou Tian estimated that their initial strength would still be inferior to that of physical evolvers. Groping his way along, he soon exited the cave. The space before him suddenly brightened and widened. Perhaps this was what the textbook meant by at first it was extremely narrow, barely allowing a person to pass. After leaving the cave, Zhou Tian found himself standing on a path that spiraled upward along the wall. This place resembled the interior of a colossal tower, with a road clinging to the wall and winding upward. The road was extremely wide. Zhou Tian estimated it to be nearly a kilometer across. The walls resembled cliff faces, their material and style strikingly consistent with those in the Black Void and the cave. Countless cave entrances were scattered across the walls like stars. This space was so vast that it was difficult to see the other side with the naked eye. Looking up, the ceiling was a starry sky, and it was those starlights that illuminated the place. Many cave openings on the cliffs emitted light. Could those be secret power seeds? Some lights were also scattered along the spiraling path, but they were all quite far from Zhou Tian. Zhou Tian did not rush to chase after those lights. Instead, he pondered certain matters. The instructions for the second stage selection and the explanations about the secret power seeds. At first glance, they seemed unremarkable, but every time he recalled them, a vague unease lingered in his heart. Use every possible means to obtain and fuse with secret power seeds. Zhou Tian murmured this phrase, and seeds of thought began to sprout in his mind. Currently, Zhou Tian had no better idea for passing the selection. Snatching them was likely impossible unless a secret power seed suddenly fell from the sky and landed on his face. So he simply followed the road and walked toward the top of the cliff. This space was enormous. Zhou Tian estimated that even if he walked for 7 days, he might not reach the end. As he had expected, his physical condition had indeed improved. After walking uphill continuously for over 2 hours, he still felt energetic. In the past, he would have needed to catch his breath after just a few dozen minutes. During these 2 hours of walking, new lights kept appearing on the road or emanating from cave openings. It seemed that the secret power seeds were not delivered all at once, but descended intermittently, though their total number was certainly limited. This inheritance tower originally housed about 6,500 people, but fewer than a third reached the second stage. By this ratio, the number of secret power seeds distributed was probably less than 1,000. No, perhaps even fewer. From the start of the second stage, the number of secret power seeds Zhou Tian alone had seen was already substantial. Dense pillars of light appeared throughout the space, not counting those already claimed. The competition within the entire inheritance tower gradually intensified. The number of people flooding into the glowing cave entrances increased steadily. By the 6th hour of Juxian's journey, he saw over a dozen people blasted out of a distant cave, opening some flying so far they fell into the abyss below the cliff. Their agonizing screams sent chills down Juxian's spine. Although he knew it was virtual, the despair of facing death for the first time was enough to make anyone hesitate. Time passed amidst walking and hiding. Perhaps due to the ability called mental perception, Jiutian managed to avoid being discovered by many while deliberately evading others. On the first day, Jiutian carefully sensed his surroundings, moving slowly while ensuring he was not detected by anyone. On the second day, battles occurred noticeably more frequently than the first, confirming his conjectures. Lacking the constraints of rules, the dark side of human nature was awakened. He witnessed events that violated his moral principles more than once. Starting from the third day, the number of secret power seeds surged dramatically. According to Juxian's estimate, about 100 secret power seeds appeared on the first day, around 150 on the second, and by the 5th hour of the third day, he had already seen nearly several thousand new cave openings glowing with light. This is insane, Jiutian marveled. The inheritance tower seemed to have gone wild, constantly stimulating the nerves of the inheritors, deliberately tossing seeds into crowded caves, as if afraid they wouldn't fight. The inheritors grew increasingly frenzied. Since they didn't need to eat, drink, or sleep within the tower, battles raged around the clock. The frequency and brutality of conflicts escalated rapidly, and soon severed limbs and organs could be seen everywhere. Is it necessary to simulate this realistically? Jiutian, who initially felt nauseous at the smell of blood, had now grown numb. A third of the time had passed, yet Jiutian still showed no intention of competing for the secret power seeds. His ingrained caution and patience kept him rational, preventing him from being swept up in the frenzy of battle. However, the surging number of secret power seeds also made Jiutian begin to doubt his approach. After all, given the trend in their appearance, it seemed that everyone could eventually get one. Opening the evolution option on his personal panel, Jiutian checked his progress. Individual named Jiutian, spiritual evolution path, telekinesis type formula, current progress 136. 9. Spiritual evolution path, illusion type formula, current progress 63. In fact, as early as the end of the first stage, the progress of Juxian's telekinesis type formula had already exceeded 100, reaching 112. 83. None of the instructions on the intelligent armband mentioned that progress could exceed 100, yet he had achieved it. Either his authority was insufficient or he had encountered a situation unrecorded by this civilization, far more advanced than Earth. Neither prospect was good news for Jiutian. After all fear stems from the unknown. Regardless, since this phenomenon had occurred, there must be a reason, and that reason might be the key to validating his ideas. During these days of walking upward, Jiutian also engaged in light meditation repeatedly. Not only did his overall evolution progress increase from the initial 112, 83 to 136, 9, but even the illusion-type evolution progress rose from 47, 21 to 63, 2. Meanwhile, his individual comprehensive ability value increased from 326 to 589, with intelligence and physical ability remaining unchanged, while spiritual power alone increased by 263. As of now, what Jiutian lacked most was time. If his conjectures turned out to be wrong, he might still have to compete with others for ready-made secret power seeds. But his combat ability was relatively too weak, so unless absolutely necessary, it was best to avoid fighting. Of course, as the saying goes, he who walks often by the roadside will eventually get his shoes wet. He who walks the night path will eventually meet a ghost. You plant flowers with care, but they don't bloom. You plant willows carelessly, and they provide shade. What you fear will come to pass. Or in Western terms, Murphy's Law. When the third day was almost half over, roughly noon in real-world time, Jiutian, who had been carefully avoiding crowded areas, arrived at a spot with a massive rock and decided to take a rest. Although his physical stamina far exceeded before, mental fatigue could not be eliminated by enhanced physical fitness. Moreover, since there was no need to eat and no conditions for it, Jiutian felt that his mouth was practically tasteless. How he longed to eat something, even just a steamed bun. Jiutian sighed. At this rate his sense of taste would soon. Over these days he had been pondering various matters while walking and constantly remaining vigilant of his surroundings. His nerves had been taut without a moment's rest, and now he was nearing his limit. Fortunately, there was a huge boulder blocking part of the road ahead, offering a place for Jiutian to hide briefly, so he decided to rest. However, on this wide road, even such a massive rock only covered a small section. He hoped the journey ahead would be as smooth as before. Jiutian sighed, and the next second, he wanted to slap himself twice. The moment that thought crossed his mind, a magnificent gray light shot up from the ground, less than 5 meters in front of him. A heart-shaped gray gem, with 63 facets accompanied by a gray pillar of light, landed precisely in front of Jiutian. In that instant, Zhou Tian sensed 7 or 8 different auras locking onto him, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He swallowed hard cold sweat forming on his palms, and cursed a very foul word in his mind. How is this even possible? Was this stroke of luck good or bad? Zhou Tian sighed in resignation. He had been so careful, yet still found himself caught in this unforeseen calamity. But Zhou Tian was never one to hesitate. Sensing the auras locking onto him from all directions, he gritted his teeth and reached for the gray crystal, intending to use it as leverage regardless of whether he could harness it. That's mine. A voice chimed crisp as a wind chime. Zhou Tian froze, noticing a petulant face suddenly appearing on the rock beside him. Before he could process the face on the stone, a jolt ran through him, and he instinctively sidestepped. Boom! A thunderous blast erupted where he had just stood, dust billowing. Zhou Tian stared blankly at the crater, now marring the ground, cold sweat trickling down his back. "Oh, sorry. Are you okay? I didn't mean it." The face on the rock seemed equally startled, twisting urgently, as if trying to break free. Wait. Don't move." Zhou Tian was alarmed, both by the face and the explosion, sensing imminent danger. Don't worry. The spot you're standing on is clear of mines, but don't run around. If you get blown up by running, it's not my fault." Zhou Tian halted immediately. The face seemed to strain with effort, and he found himself clenching his teeth. After much struggle, a petite figure hopped down from the rock. It was a masterful camouflage, paint and texture blending seamlessly into the stone, so convincing that Zhou Tian hadn't noticed despite being so close. Are you? Are you hurt?" The figure fidgeted apologetically, and Zhou Tian realized it was a girl. "I'm fine, but where did you get those landmines? That's too dangerous. What if you blow yourself up?" Zhou Tian was both exasperated and amused as he looked her over. The girl's clothes were unrecognizable beneath layers of rock-colored paint and texture patterns, her face smeared with pigment of unknown origin. Her long hair was tied in a braided ponytail draped over her shoulder. Remarkably, her hair and eyes were a matching gray like the heart-shaped crystal floating in midair. "I made them myself. To keep scoundrels like you from stealing my things," she retorted indignantly. "They won't. If you get blown up, you deserve it for trying to take my secret power seed. Yours? It just appeared. Lying is unbecoming for a child." Zhou Tian raised an eyebrow. "I'm an adult. You're the child," the girl fumed. "I calculated this spot. I've been waiting here for ages." "Calculated?" Zhou Tian was surprised. "You mean you predicted a secret power seed would fall here?" "I also knew its attribute would match mine perfectly," she huffed. "So their appearance follows a pattern." "I couldn't tell," Zhou Tian said. "Oh, I get it. You must be one of those brute force evolution types, right?" The girl sneered. "Zhou Tian. Anyway, I'm going to claim my seed. You don't seem interested in fighting for it. Go find another. Today and tomorrow are your last chances. Let me remove these mines first." She turned to reach for the floating gem. "Wait," Zhou Tian interrupted. "Don't touch it yet. At least 7 people have locked onto us. The moment you take it, we'll be swarmed." 7? The girl was stunned. "Where did they come from? I don't see anyone. Are you tricking me?" "Why would I lie?" Zhou Tian sighed. "You picked such a conspicuous spot. Did you think no one would notice?" "But it's mine. I waited here so long. How could they know?" "Try it," Zhou Tian shrugged. "But if you move, I'm running." "Don't." The girl warily withdrew her hand. Over the past few days, Zhou Tian had witnessed countless conflicts. Initially, people were restrained, but by the 3rd day, the madness buried in some was barely containable. In the relatively peaceful outside world, fighting and killing were strictly forbidden. But human nature has its dark side, and in this lawless realm, most people's shadows were magnified. Coupled with the initial success of basic evolution, everyone, regardless of their path, had gained superhuman strength after transformation. Failure meant losing it all, which further drove people to desperate measures to grow stronger. Thus, to avoid being eliminated by stronger competitors and to resist succumbing to that frenzy, Zhou Tian had been avoiding fights, but that didn't make him a coward. Sensing the encroaching figures, Zhou Tian felt a surge of irritation. So close to the seed, any move he made would be seen as a threat, and they'd charge recklessly. A secret power seed's allure outweighed everything in such circumstances. "Hey, can you dismantle those mines?" "Yes," the girl nodded. "Good. At least this improves our odds of survival." Zhou Tian thought for a moment. "Take them apart now. And no matter what happens, trust me." "Why?" as she squinted at him. "Then go negotiate with them." Zhou Tian stepped aside, revealing the scene behind him. Even the girl could now see faint figures approaching. "Ghosts," she shrieked. "No ghosts. If you delay, we'll be ghosts." Zhou Tian rubbed his temples. Without a word, the girl crouched and began disarming the bombs. Watching her dig up the explosive stones, Zhou Tian was slightly impressed. The bombs were hollow rocks filled with highly compressed air, cleverly pressurized without liquefying. Any external shock would cause them to burst, launching rock fragments like a 360-degree shotgun blast. Zhou Tian guessed this was due to her special ability, likely an intelligence-based evolution. He felt a rush of gratitude that the bomb had stepped on was buried, its force mostly directed upward, and his quick mental reflexes had saved him. Otherwise his frail body might not have survived. As she dug up the third, Zhou Tian felt the air tremble, finally losing patience. Earlier than I expected, he caught a glimpse of a figure darting from the shadows. Over the past 3 days Zhou Tian had honed his psychic sense, a kind of evolved sixth sense. While not directly combat-ready, it was invaluable. He had been watching the 7 people behind him. They'd hesitated earlier, likely intimidated by the girl's bombs. Now that she was dismantling them, their patience was wearing thin. The figure attacked from where the bomb had been removed. The girl didn't notice, but Zhou Tian sensed it clearly. He picked up one of the excavated bombs, weighing it. "What are you doing?" "That's dangerous," the girl gasped. Without explanation, Zhou Tian tracked the approaching figure, pivoted on his heel, and hurled the bomb with all his— "What a—" The figure cried out in disbelief. Boom. The blast sent him flying, screams echoing as shrapnel pelted him. The girl's jaw dropped. She pointed a trembling finger at him. "How did you do that?" "Oh, I was a pitcher in my college baseball club." Zhou Tian flashed a bright smile. "That's not what I meant." She shot up like a startled cat. "Was that person right next to us? I didn't even see him." "It's fine. The rest are coming now," Zhou Tian said. "Oh." The girl spotted figures emerging. "Hurry up and dig, or we'll have to kneel to them," Zhou Tian urged. "Stop ordering me around." She gritted her teeth, but worked faster. Zhou Tian threw another bomb, which exploded midair, halting the advancing group momentarily. The groaning figure nearby served as a warning, but greed overrode caution. For those without a seed, each one was a ticket to a higher realm. All done. After Zhou Tian threw a 4th bomb, wounding another, the girl had unearthed all 9. One had been triggered, 4 thrown, leaving 4. What now? She huddled behind him, trembling as the attackers closed in. Alone her bombs wouldn't have saved this. Zhou Tian watched silently. A few were close enough that he could feel their icy stares. At a critical moment he leaned in and whispered, "Go get the seed." "But—" She hesitated. "Go." His tone was firm. She spun around and grabbed the gray heart-shaped crystal. The move galvanized the attackers, their speed doubling. As all eyes fixed on her, Zhou Tian seized 2 bombs. Amidst curses and a deafening explosion, Zhou Tian watched the spectacular blast grab the last 2 bombs, scooped up the girl, and, to her utter disbelief, sprinted toward the cliff and leaped. Have you lost your mind?" The pursuers clearly hadn't anticipated this situation. In this space, the only footholds were the spiraling upward path and the scattered caves beside it, of falling into the abyss beyond meant certain death. Under everyone's stunned gaze, Zhou Tian leaped down with the girl in his arms, accompanied by her terrified scream. Soon another explosion answered their shock. Just below the cliff, Zhou Tian detonated his last 2 bombs. Since the path spiraled upward, it meant there was another path directly below. But ordinarily, unless one could fly, jumping from the cliffside wouldn't land you on the lower path. Unless there was an additional force. Just as they fell above the lower path, Zhou Tian hurled his last 2 bombs and detonated them. The bombs were filled not with gunpowder, but with highly compressed air, so the explosion's core didn't generate dangerous superheat. Instead, it produced a thrust at the contact point, propelling Zhou Tian and the girl toward the lower path. Most of the shattered rocks were fragmented into smaller pieces by the double explosions, reducing their lethality. Still, a mix of debris and shockwaves struck Zhou Tian and the girl. Fortunately, the girl was petite, so the debris mostly hit Zhou Tian as he held her. Thud. Zhou Tian landed with the girl rolling several times to absorb the impact. The girl, too terrified to make a sound after her fall, trembled uncontrollably. Dust from the landing and explosion settled. After an unknown time, Zhou Tian groaned. "Little miss, how much longer will you crush me?" "Aunt, are you okay? I thought you were dead," the girl cried, scrambling out of his arms. "I'm not that easy to kill," Zhou Tian said, "but you nearly suffocated me." "Nonsense," she sobbed, punching him. "I'm very light." Sigh. Zhou Tian surveyed the mess around them. "What are you sighing about?" the girl asked suspiciously. "I can't believe I actually escaped." Zhou Tian sat up shakily. "I've memorized the spiritual energy signatures of those who ambushed us. Not one of them will get away." "What do you mean actually escaped?" "So you weren't sure this plan would work from the start?" The girl fumed again. "Nothing has a 100% success rate. I just chose the best option." Zhou Tian dusted himself off. "Before jumping, I threw 2 bombs to test if they'd explode as I expected. I'm quite cautious. Of course, I admit there was some gambling involved, but we won, didn't we?" Zhou Tian smiled. In truth, this dangerous gamble wasn't as easy as Zhou Tian made it seem. Leaping off a cliff and detonating bombs beside oneself required immense mental fortitude. Fortunately, his evolved spiritual energy allowed him to stay calm and rational, minimizing emotional interference in his decisions, which is why he dared to jump with the girl. Still, his condition was far from ideal. He had absorbed almost the entire blast's aftermath and the fall, along with debris strikes. Zhou Tian wasn't even sure if he had broken any bones. Thankfully, spiritual evolution required body modification, which, while not as robust as pure physical evolution, Someone had survived at the epicenter of an explosion, had still significantly enhanced his physique. Oh, by the way, what's your name? Zhou Tian asked. I'm Wen Yunyun. She hesitated before adding, I'm on the intelligence evolution path. Zhou Tian's spiritual evolution. He nodded. Spiritual evolution. Wen Yunyun blinked. You can actually understand that. I'd say everyone has their strengths, Zhou Tian replied. What's your evolution progress? 91. Wen Yunyun put her hands on her hips. Impressive, right? Give me a little more time, and I might hit 100. Oh, not bad, Zhou Tian nodded. What about you? She asked. It's okay, tell me. I won't laugh. Let me see. Last time I checked it was 136. Now. Oh, 140. Oh, 40. Not bad, not bad. Wen Yunyun patted his shoulder. Wait, how did you reach the second stage of... It's 140, Zhou Tian corrected. How much? Wen Yunyun thought she misheard. 140, he said seriously. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Wen Yunyun nearly jumped. Evolution can exceed 100. I don't believe it. See for yourself. Zhou Tian innocently moved his arm guard in front of her. Wen Yunyun stared at the displayed text stunned. Individual Zhou Tian's spiritual evolution path telekinesis equation current progress 140. 78. How is this possible? Evolution progress can actually break 100. She stared at the digits. Then all my previous calculations need to be redone. Don't get too excited yet. This place isn't safe. Since I saved your life, can you give me a hand? Zhou Tian tried to stand but failed. Wen Yunyun set aside her thoughts, and despite her small frame grunted as she struggled to help him up. Zhou Tian was right. Even without immediate pursuit, this place was unsafe. In those brief moments, he sensed several gazes watching them. Fortunately, a cave was nearby. Zhou Tian painstakingly walked to its entrance, carefully sensing that few people were inside, then slipped in quietly with Wen Yunyun. Finding a more secluded spot, Zhou Tian finally sat down with a long sigh. Wen Yunyun, exhausted from supporting him, immediately began operating something on her arm guard's projection. What's this? Can the arm guard work as a computer? Zhou Tian blinked at the display. Of course. Have you never used it? Wen Yunyun asked, puzzled. What's this? Can the arm guard work as a computer? Zhou Tian blinked at the display. Of course. With that, Wen Yunyun ignored him, absorbed in her calculations on the projection. Meanwhile, Zhou Tian felt a wave of exhaustion, a fatigue he hadn't experienced since entering the inheritance tower, and he drifted into a deep sleep. After an unknown time, Zhou Tian woke groggily to find a pair of lively eyes staring at him curiously. Why are you looking at me like that? He asked. My calculations are done, Wen Yunyun said. Oh, Zhou Tian nodded. Previously I assumed 100 was the maximum evolution progress, so my results were off. Now I've broken that limit and rebuilt the model. The results should be closer to reality. Oh, Zhou Tian nodded. The new results aren't much different. Originally I calculated that only a third of participants would pass the first stage, and 1 in 100,000 would reach 90 progress. About 2700 people. But your appearance revealed a gap, the possibility of exceeding 100. My calculations now show that about 1 in a million, around 2700 people, can achieve that. Wen Yunyun said solemnly. Oh, Zhou Tian nodded. Did you not understand? Wen Yunyun wanted to hit him. No, I just woke up. My mind's still foggy, Zhou Tian laughed. It means you're incredibly evolved. You might be one of the best on this planet. Wen Yunyun was exasperated. Oh, Zhou Tian stood up and stretched. Wen Yunyun was about to say more, but Zhou Tian interrupted. I don't care if I'm the best or the worst on this planet, he said calmly. I'll try to go as far as I can, but who knows? You say I'm among the best 2700, but don't forget the second stage is almost halfway over, and I don't even have a single secret energy seed yet. Wen Yunyun was taken aback by his response. Right? She suddenly realized. You still don't have a secret. According to my calculations, the peak period for secret energy seeds is the third day, then it declines. You need to grab one while there's still time. Who do you think I can beat? Zhou Tian shrugged. I feel better after sleeping, but am not confident contending with those physical evolution monsters out there. But, Wen Yunyun urged, are you just going to be eliminated? Probably not, Zhou Tian winked. If my idea works, avoiding them might actually be a good thing. A good thing? Wen Yunyun was confused. Why didn't you do your reading comprehension on the second stage's description, science student? Zhou Tian seemed amused by her confusion. Perhaps it's because I've read quite a lot, so I'm particularly sensitive to words. Zhou Tian displayed the introduction of the second stage on his arm guard. It's obvious that both the first stage's introduction and the other textual descriptions in the arm guard are very rigorous in terms of language logic and word choice, but the second stage is not. Zhou Tian pointed at a certain sentence in the second stage's introduction which read, using every possible means to acquire and fuse the seeds of secret power lasting for 7 Earth days. Do you see the problem with that sentence? Zhou Tian asked. No, Wen Yunyun shook her head. The introduction says using every possible means to acquire and fuse the seeds of secret power. This sentence has two implications. One is that we should strive to acquire the seeds. Two, it says every means, which implies there is more than one way to acquire them. But the only way we know to acquire the seeds is through competition, Zhou Tian said. Do you mean that besides taking seeds by force there are other ways to obtain them? Wen Yunyun frowned. But I think that interpretation is a bit far-fetched. Maybe she just wanted to emphasize the importance of acquiring the seeds. Alright then, look at this. Zhou Tian called up another document, an explanation of the seeds of secret. The greatest source of seeds of secret power is when a secret power master at the moment of their impending fall condenses their own secret power into a seed. As long as later generations acquire and fuse it, they can become a secret power user. What's wrong with this passage? Wen Yunyun asked. If the greatest source of seeds of secret power is those condensed by the so-called secret power masters themselves, Zhou Tian squinted. Then how did the very first secret power masters come to possess secret power? Wen Yunyun immediately saw the problem. Right? If you can only become a secret power user by having a seed, and seeds can only be condensed by secret power masters, then where did the first person with secret power come from? The girl was stunned again. So there is more than one way to acquire secret power, Wen Yunyun murmured. It seems you are teachable after all. Zhou Tian smiled faintly. Have you found a way now? The girl asked expectantly. I have some clues, but no concrete method yet. Zhou Tian shook his head. What do you plan to do then? The girl asked. Originally, I thought I'd just go upward, and if my own ideas didn't work out, I'd grab one when the opportunity arose. Zhou Tian said, but you mentioned that the eruption of seeds will gradually dry up, so that method won't work well anymore. So we'll probably stay here and try to find another way as best I can. What about you? I didn't really have a plan anyway. The girl's eyes darted around. I just wanted to snag a suitable seed and then hide until the second stage ends. Then let's do it together. Zhou Tian nodded. Great. The girl smiled. The days that followed became extraordinarily calm. The girl began attempting to fuse the hard-won gray seed of secret power. Streams of gray energy swirled around Wen Yunyun. Zhou Tian stood guard over her until the fourth day, only relaxing when he saw no issues, then began preparing his own matters. Meditation was the most important way to evolve spiritual power, but it was not the only one. After the previous struggle for the gray seed, Zhou Tian's spiritual power had advanced by about 4 in a short time. This allowed him to infer that emotional fluctuations had a significant impact on spiritual evolution. After 3 days of contemplation, Zhou Tian had also formed a preliminary idea of how to acquire secret power without relying on external seeds. Though he couldn't confirm it, yet it strengthened his conviction. Letting out a long breath, Zhou Tian entered a state of deepest meditation. The flashes of insight from days of thought now collided wildly. In the shadow of the moon, the figure on the throne opened his eyes once more. Mona, the second stage is halfway through, isn't it? How's the situation? A dreamlike phantom appeared before the throne. The exquisite girl bowed slightly. Currently, over 50 million seeds of secret power have been deployed in all the inheritance towers. 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, 6 of them have been successfully fused. The rest were either destroyed due to accidents during the holder's fusion process, or a very small number remained undiscovered. Is that so? So about 45 million people have fused them. What about those little geniuses with evolution levels exceeding 100? Luo said, rubbing his fingertips. After the first stage ended, there were 27123 recipients with evolution levels at or exceeding 100. Among them, 1 is a 7-star inheritor, 28 are 6-star inheritors, and 520 are 5-star inheritors. If Wen Yunyun had heard this data, she would have been very proud, as it was very close to the number she had calculated. Luo remained silent, waiting for Anna to continue. Anna knew that Luo wasn't just asking for these surface-level figures, so she continued. Of the 27123, 511 were eliminated for various reasons. Of the remaining 509 have already fused a seed of secret power. Luo raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. Besides those who have fused seeds, 1 person has successfully undergone auto-awakening. 2893 are in the process of auto-awakening, and the remaining 23209 have yet to realize auto-awakening exists. 2893 in the process of awakening, but only 1 has succeeded, Luo said with a light laugh. Humph. A civilized planet with a population of 8.5 billion, and in the end, less than 3000 usable people. Over 27000 with talent, yet over 2400 are fools. That ratio is already quite high. Don't forget, on our last planet, the number of recipients who underwent auto-awakening was only in the tens, Mona said, walking forward and placing her ethereal hand on Luo's shoulder as if to comfort him. Not enough. Far from enough, Luo shook his head. To fight against the abyss, what use are geniuses of this number? Even 100 million more wouldn't be enough. A cold gleam flashed in his eyes. What I want isn't 100 million geniuses. I want 1 supreme genius. In the face of the abyss, numbers are just a formality, merely becoming fodder for it. I've sifted through so many civilizations teaching, without discrimination, all to find that potential one. You will find him, Luo. The phantom light touched Luo's clenched fist. Does this look like finding him to you? Luo sneered. They can't even see such an obvious trap. For normal evolution, recipient seeds are indeed their best chance to become secret power users. But for geniuses whose evolution exceeds 100, fusing someone else's seed will only ruin their own. If the fused seed is compatible with their talent, it might be okay. But if they fuse a seed that conflicts with their talent, even progress becomes difficult. Luo's eyes held a cold light. Even with a compatible seed, their final achievements are unlikely to surpass those who created the seeds. You set your standards too high for them, Luo, Anna said softly. Even on Morosa, citizens are clearly informed of the pros and cons of seeds. Only those with no hope of breakthrough choose to fuse them. But you've never been clear with these outsiders, easily leading to misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Luo chuckled coldly. That's because they weren't careful enough. I left room in the explanation of the rules. If they can't discern it, they only have themselves to blame for not paying attention. If they don't possess top-tier will, talent, and wisdom, how could they be worthy of the Morosa inheritance? All right, don't be angry. The universe is vast. Perhaps the next recipient is the one you're looking for. Anna nestled in Luo's arms. Luo tried to touch Anna's body, but his fingers passed through the phantom light. Even knowing this would be the outcome, he couldn't hide his disappointment and sighed. I hope so. Time is running out. We'll see, just wait and see. His lament echoed through the dark, silent sanctuary, as faint as the dying breath of an insect at dusk. 2 days later, within a certain cavern, gray currents of air swirled around the girl's body, cycling continuously in and out through her mouth and nose with each breath. A miniature gray heart-shaped crystal lay in the girl's palm, the gray currents produced by its constant self-disintegration. Wen Yunyun hadn't expected the fusion of the secret power seed to last this long. Perhaps the ability granted by this seed was more potent than she had anticipated. According to her initial estimate, it should have taken at most a day, but it had consumed a full 2 days. Fortunately, it was now nearing its end, and she could complete the fusion before the 7th day. What truly worried Wen Yunyun, however, was Zhou Tian, who remained motionless beside her. Over the past 2 days, Wen Yunyun had occasionally paused the fusion to stretch her limbs, but Zhou Tian hadn't even opened his eyes once. Had she known that during the first stage he had remained unmoving for over 10 consecutive days, she likely wouldn't have been so concerned. Yet now, as the second stage drew to a close, an unexpected situation arose. Many who had already fused with the secret power seeds were hunting down and slaughtering those who had not yet completed the process. Becoming a secret power user represented a qualitative leap for an evolver, a transformation from an ordinary person into a true evolver. Consequently, their power was overwhelming to those who remained normal. Perhaps they wished to reduce competition in the 3rd stage by limiting the number of their peers, or perhaps they simply derived pleasure from bullying the weak. Regardless, even the instigators Luo and Anna had not anticipated that the number of those completing the 2nd stage would be far lower than expected. Starting from the 3rd day, the number of inheritors who had successfully fused with the secret power seeds surged. Almost in unison, they launched attacks on those who had yet to complete the fusion. Those who had been promising candidates for fusion were mercilessly slaughtered, resulting in a vast waste of the secret power seeds. This scenario unfolded in nearly all 1800 inheritance towers. Over these 2 days, Wen Yunyun had been fusing with the secret power seed in a state of constant fear, dreading that a fully fused evolver would burst in and eliminate both her and Zhou Tian. Thankfully, she was now on the verge of success. At the very least, she would be able to protect herself. But could Zhou Tian succeed? Although Wen Yunyun supported Zhou Tian's intentions, this was after all an uncharted path. Even if it was the right one, would there be enough time? Wen Yunyun watched Zhou Tian seated in meditation with a tinge of worry. Less than 48 hours remained. When there were only 40 hours left, Wen Yunyun successfully completed the fusion of the secret power seed. The gray currents vanished from around her body, replaced by a pair of gray eyes that gleamed in the darkness. Strangely, this shade of gray in the darkness seemed neither eerie nor frightening. Instead, it evoked a sense of reassurance. Wen Yunyun blinked, and the gray light gradually faded. She lowered her gaze to examine her arm guard. Individual name, Wen Yunyun. Intelligence evolution path modification type equation. Current progress, 167. Comprehensive evaluation, 791. A new line for comprehensive evaluation had appeared in the original data. Wen Yunyun attempted to access it, only to find her reading privileges still insufficient. She glanced at Zhou Tian, who remained seated and motionless beside her. Wen Yunyun rose, stretching her limbs. She looked around, deciding to find something to test the results of her recent efforts. Just as she turned to leave, Zhou Tian's eyes, which had been still for so long, suddenly twitched slightly. The movement was so subtle that even someone staring directly at him might not have noticed it. So what was Zhou Tian's situation now? He himself would probably find it difficult to describe. that ineffable sensation where fantasy and reality had begun to blur. Over 2 days ago, Jiutian had entered a state of meditation. For him, achieving this state was no longer a challenge. But this time the object of his meditation was himself. Even he hadn't realized he could remember events from so far back. According to scholarly research on Earth, humans can at most remember events that occurred after the age of 3. Before that, the brain is not fully developed and lacks the capacity for memory. This theory had never been questioned, as very few people on Earth could recall events before the age of 3. Of course, other theories suggested that those memories are recorded in the subconscious, but they are simply inaccessible through normal means. At this moment within Jiutian's mind, memories began to emerge from the earliest days of his infancy. The warmth of being held in his mother's arms while swaddled, the rough sensation of touching his father's beard, the metallic smell of a severed umbilical cord, the softness of fur. Was that the texture of an animal? Yes, it was the big dog that had passed away when he was 3 years old. In photographs, he was seen riding on its back, its gaze calm and gentle. Why did he possess memories of which he had no recollection? Was this a life flashing before his eyes? Jiutian wondered. The scene shifted quickly. A newly paved asphalt road appeared beneath his feet, and the pungent smell of bitumen was distinct. Jiutian remembered this road. It was the new road built outside his home when he first started elementary school. He could even recall the sticky feeling of the soles of his shoes on the hot pavement in summer. Jiutian walked along this road, and familiar scenes emerged one by one: the supermarket outside his home, the plane trees lining the street, and finally his school. Many areas were not fully reconstructed with realistic details. Some buildings replaced the less significant locations in Jiutian's memory. For instance, the noodle shop he frequented had replaced a foot massage parlor he barely knew. However, these altered details presented Jiutian's memories in a more concentrated manner. Jiutian strolled through the hometown of his memories, from his front door to his elementary school, middle school, high school, and the university that wasn't in his hometown. It replaced the residential areas he had only seen from the outside but never entered. As Jiutian walked, these scenes became increasingly vivid. By the time he had circled the entire city, this place had become even more familiar and comforting than reality itself. Looking at the realistic texture details on the walls and the children's graffiti, everything was so clear. He could even feel the breeze against his fingertips and smell the scorching summer air. Jiutian moved his fingers and opened the door to his old home. Inside were his toys and books from childhood, with all the furniture arranged exactly as it had been when he was young. Jiutian suddenly felt a surge of emotion, as if he might cry. It had been a long time since he had last reflected on his past. Since graduating, his attention had been focused entirely on the present. He had neither the energy nor the time to recall or examine his history. Jiutian navigated the familiar path through the hallway and the living room, arriving at the backyard of his home. They had bought a ground-floor apartment to accommodate his grandmother, who had difficulty walking. It came with a small backyard where his grandfather cultivated many orchids. As a child, he would count ants there. Smelling the faint fragrance of orchids in the air, Jiutian sat down cross-legged, his posture identical to his real-world one. But this time he didn't close his eyes. He stared at the flower bed, as if something of great importance lay there. Then a green sapling sprouted from the ground, growing, flourishing, blooming, withering, bearing fruit, its leaves dying and perishing, all in an incredibly short span of time. He shifted his gaze to the orchids beside him. They too bloomed, withered, bloomed again, and withered again at an accelerated pace. Jiutian looked up at the sky. The clear cotton candy-like sky instantly darkened, revealing a brilliant canopy of stars, and the moon, which rotated and appeared before the sky, brightened once more. The sun, moon, and stars cycled across the heavens with increasing speed until they nearly formed a continuous band. Jiutian suddenly smiled, and the frantic rotation of the sun and moon ceased abruptly. He rose to his full height and said, "I understand. Let it end." As if a mirror were shattering, cracks appeared in the surrounding scene, rapidly spreading. The cracks multiplied until the scene could no longer hold itself together, collapsing into countless fragments. This revealed a pristine white space with no discernible directions, where only Jiutian floated. Jiutian thought for a moment. He attempted the motion of taking a step forward, and beneath his foot a patch of grass materialized just enough to support his soul. "So this is the true form of my spiritual world," Jiutian murmured with a smile. Humanity's research into spiritual power had not yet reached the realm of science. All concepts related to spiritual power existed only within broad, vague hypotheses and theories. Consequently, there were no practical examples to guide Jiutian on how to self-awaken the secret power seed along the spiritual power evolution path. Fortunately, Jiutian possessed a natural talent for understanding spiritual power. Shortly after advancing his evolution to 100, he had vaguely sensed the so-called spiritual world and speculated that the method to acquire a secret power seed on his own lay within this realm. Finally, after deciding to abandon the struggle for other secret power seeds and focus entirely on self-awakening, Jiutian reached this stage as if it were a natural progression. In truth, the conditions for completing the self-awakening of the spiritual power evolution path were simple to describe, but difficult to achieve. Know myself. Jiutian placed both feet on the grass that had formed abruptly in the white space. Know yourself. This phrase was originally inscribed on the lintel of the Temple of Delphi in ancient Greek civilization. The philosopher Socrates had adopted it as the declaration of his philosophical principles. These words were simple, only 5 characters, yet how many in the millennia since had truly achieved this? Knowing oneself meant not only examining and dissecting oneself from a rational objective perspective, but also understanding the meaning behind one's own actions. The prerequisite for understanding the world was to first know oneself. Only then could one use oneself as a reference point to comprehend and explain the entire universe. Reaching this stage marked the true beginning of spiritual power evolution. Only by breaking free from the cycle of one's own memories could one become the absolute master of their thoughts and memories, and only then could they arrive at their true spiritual world. The memories Jiutian had seen earlier, though intricate and realistic, were fetters that trapped his mind. If he couldn't break them, his thinking would forever be confined within the rules of his original world. He would be trapped in an endless loop of memories. One of the most crucial traits of spiritual power, imagination, would cease to exist, and the ultimate result would be mediocrity. Only by becoming the master of his memories and breaking the shackles of his original recollections through willpower could the true spiritual world be revealed. So everything in the spiritual world must be constructed by oneself. Jiutian set his gaze as calm as still water. Then let an island rise, water appear, a pavilion form, a tree stand, and the bright moon ascend. In the next moment, the grass beneath Jiutian's feet suddenly expanded. Unlike the memory world he had just experienced, this grassland felt more solid. Once formed, even Jiutian himself found it difficult to alter. Therefore, he was extremely cautious in shaping this domain, refraining from any drastic actions. Thus, a patch of grassland emerged from the white void, extending over an area of approximately 100,000 square meters. Then clear water gushed forth from the void, gradually converging into a pale blue lake. The land at the center of the lake rose slightly, forming an islet. On the islet, a pavilion materialized. Its exquisite flying eaves and clever mortisian joints formed a rustic and grand lakeside pavilion. A willow tree 10 meters tall also sprang up, its lush leaves swaying without any wind. Finally, a bright moon hung high in the sky. This scene, even if placed in reality, would be considered a breathtaking view, a picture-perfect landscape. Jiutian dared not continue. Even forming this relatively simple scene with few elements had put him under pressure. If he recklessly continued to evolve his spiritual world, he feared his spiritual power would be unable to withstand it, leading to a direct collapse. The further evolution would have to wait until his spiritual power grew. Now came the most crucial moment. Jiutian's gaze no longer held any hesitation or confusion. While Jiutian was busy in his spiritual world, time in the real world continued to flow. When he finished shaping his spiritual world, exactly 35 hours remained. At that very moment, a faint moon-white fluorescence appeared around Jiutian. This was the first sign of activity from him in 3 days, immediately putting Wen Yunyun on high alert. Just 2 hours later, a stranger intruded, drawn by the moon-white glow in the darkness. But as soon as he approached, he fled the cavern. The girl, hidden in the shadows, breathed a sigh of relief. With 30 hours left, the one who had fled returned, accompanied by 4 others. They advanced purposefully toward Jiutian's location. Wen Yunyun knew her worst fear had come to pass. "Is the one fusing with the secret power seed here?" An undisguised voice sounded in the darkness. "Yes, but I suspect there's more than one. Usually those in the process of fusion are vulnerable, but I sensed danger when I approached earlier." "Perhaps someone else is here," another voice replied. "There are 5 of us. Even if there's someone else, there's nothing to fear," said a voice full of confidence. "This person's secret power is strange. Why is it this color?" The moon-white glow in the darkness was indeed conspicuous. "Maybe it's a rare type. I saw a gray one before, but 2 reckless lunatics snatched it away. Then we definitely can't let this one finish fusing. If a rare type's fusion is disrupted, that person must be furious, right? Ha ha." Wen Yunyun overheard the arrogant exchange of the 5 who had entered. Amidst her initial tension, a feeling of disgust began to emerge. She glanced at her armed guard. Nearly 30 hours remained until the end. She couldn't stall them for that long. She could only hope Jiutian would wake up soon. The young girl gritted her teeth and pressed something in the darkness. The 5 approaching figures suddenly halted. "Watch your heads." Countless stalactites hanging from the cavern's ceiling suddenly loosened, then plummeted like thick stone spears. The 5 reacted almost instantly, moving swiftly even before the stalactites began to fall. 4 of them dodged with relative ease, while one had a closer call. "Something's wrong. These stalactites are very sturdy, Even if we deliberately tried to destroy them, it would be difficult. How could such a large-scale loosening happen suddenly? Someone said, their tone growing serious. One of them moved to inspect the fallen stalactites, but a strange noise stopped him in his tracks. Not good. The words had barely left his mouth when the broken stalactites suddenly exploded. Countless tiny fragments burst outward in every direction. Screams, curses, and the sound of explosions erupted almost simultaneously. Chow and one of them shouted. Wen Yunyun suddenly felt her hair stand on end. Purple electric currents appeared abruptly within the cavern. The person who had narrowly avoided the falling stalactites instantly erupted in electrical light. Violet arcs of lightning radiated outward from him, pulverizing most of the stone fragments. After unleashing this attack, the man named Chow and collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. The other four looked around with lingering fear, noticing some weak walls had been pierced by the stone shards. This definitely wasn't a natural occurrence in the Black Cavity. I've never heard of such a thing happening in an inheritance tower. Someone must have tampered with it. What kind of ability can alter the environment? Their conversation had lost all trace of its earlier confidence. Wen Yunyun, hidden nearby, clenched her fists, her palms slick with sweat. She bit her lower lip. She had hoped that surprise attack would at least inflict some casualties, but it had only exhausted one of them. What should I do? Wen Yunyun felt she could hardly breathe. Although her virtual body was immune to physical ailments, the psychological tension and pressure still triggered physiological reactions. Having come this far, who would be willing to accept failure? Let's force whoever is hiding in the shadows to come out, someone suddenly suggested. He'll do it. The most robust of the five took a step back. Without any preamble or preparation, he punched the ground directly. At first, Wen Yunyun felt nothing. But then wave after wave of vibrations began to emanate from the ground, causing the entire cavern to tremble slightly. It's a shockwave. The girl realized, but it was already too late. The burly man didn't stop after the first punch. Instead, he struck the same spot again and again. Each punch sent shockwaves that reverberated and accumulated within the cavern, eventually building into a violent tremor powerful enough to shake the cavern itself. There, the burly man pointed to a spot not far from the moon-white glow, then clapped his hands together. The shockwaves that had been spreading throughout the cavern instantly converged in one direction, hurtling straight toward Wen Yunyun's hiding place. Wen Yunyun was flung away by the immense force, crashing violently into the wall behind her. Her mind went blank, and the taste of blood filled her mouth. Another shadow darted out from behind the burly man, rushing swiftly toward Wen Yunyun. The girl, using the last of her strength, activated a hidden mechanism before she could no longer hold on and fell unconscious. Two hollow stone tubes rose up and a series of round stones shot out from within them. Again, the rapidly approaching figure's eyes gleamed with cold light. He twisted his body in an impossible manner, dodging one high-speed stone after another. In less than 3 seconds, he had reached the device that was launching the stones. Though curious about how such an intricate stone mechanism had been created, he kicked it to pieces to prevent any further surprises. Then Wen Yunyun lying against the wall was discovered. Without a hint of mercy, the man delivered a roundhouse kick, but that vicious, unrestrained kick stopped just a few centimeters from the girl. Not just his foot. The man's entire twisted, tensed body was frozen in an unnatural position in midair. The moon-white fluorescence had spread to this point without anyone noticing. Under the man's horrified gaze, Zhou Tian appeared silently beside him. Zhou Tian smiled at him, but his moon-white eyes held no positive emotion. They were like the cold, aloof moon hanging high in the sky, indifferent, arrogant, and with a hint of mockery. "Oh," Zhou Tian said, tilting his head as he looked at the man, trembling slightly in midair. "I think I know you." Then his eyes curved into two cruel crescents. He had been the quintessential model child since childhood. Whether in academic, sports, arts, or morality, he always stood out among his peers. Even the strictest teachers could find no flaw in him, and his pleasing appearance only added to his perfection. Thus, when his soul was seized by the inheritance tower, and he underwent the inheritance, he naturally assumed he would pass the first stage and obtain a seed of mystic power. Even when collaborating with others to hunt those who might fuse with the mystic seeds, he felt a sense of superiority, knowing he was the strongest and fastest in this temporary team. From the second stage onward, his path had been smooth. Over the past 6 days, he had hunted more than 50 ordinary people who had yet to fuse their seeds, and even 8 who had already fused. His only setback occurred during a scramble for a mystic seed, a gray seed unlike the common ones, its uniqueness evident at a glance, snatched away by 2 reckless madmen. That was his sole defeat since beginning the inheritance. Until now. When the moon-white eyes lit up in the darkness, he was frozen midair before he could react. The emotionless pupils reflected Kui's horrified gaze as he stared at the vaguely familiar face, feeling a bone-chilling cold. Never had he felt this way. Someone completely surpassing him, holding his very life and death in their hands. "I think I recognize you." The person smiled, but Kui sensed no emotional fluctuation. "How is this possible?" What ability is that? He forced out the question with his barely movable lips. This person must have obtained a rare and powerful mystic seed. Otherwise, how could he treat him like mere prey? If I had this ability, I would be far stronger. Resentment flooded his mind. Yet the person ignored him, not even sparing a glance, and walked straight to the girl lying nearby. Zhou Tian pressed his hand to Wen Yunyun's forehead, sensed carefully, and seemed relieved. He turned to face the approaching figures in the distance. It's over. That thought flashed through Ku Yi's mind. He didn't know the specifics of Zhou Tian's ability, but if he could freeze him midair so easily, anyone else who came would be walking to their deaths. But his comrades had no idea of his predicament. Straining with all his might, he could only produce a faint sound far too weak to warn them. Seeing him motionless, they assumed he had triggered another trap. Hey, Ku Yi, you okay? If you're alive, make a sound. We're coming to help. Someone shouted. Run, you idiots. Ku Yi roared inwardly, but no matter how he struggled, it was useless. Zhou Tian watched them coldly from the darkness, his right hand slowly rising. With an invisible force, he gently lifted Wen Yunyun from the ground, making her lie more comfortably. Along with Wen Yunyun, scattered stones rose from the ground. The moon-white glow in Zhou Tian's eyes grew brighter, and even the approaching group sensed something amiss. Something's wrong, be careful, said Chao, and the one who had first unleashed lightning, feeling uneasy. But his companions showed no sign of stopping. Even if that fused guy succeeded, so what? Can two of them beat 5 of us? Scoffed the tallest figure. Zhou Tian pointed his right hand forward, and the floating stones shot out at 10 times their previous speed, too fast for even their enhanced nerves to react. Countless stones pierced through 3 bodies in an instant. Chao watched helplessly as half the head of the person in front of him was brutally smashed open. White brain matter splattered onto his face, and Chao screamed in terror. Annoying came an impatient voice as Zhou Tian emerged from the shadows carrying Wen Yunyun and Ku Yi. Everything happened so fast, the flying stones, the fallen. Moments ago alive, now mangled corpses. Though Chao had killed other inheritors before facing his own fate, made his legs tremble uncontrollably. In the next instant, Chao's body floated up involuntarily, joining Ku Yi. Suddenly, dense electric currents appeared in the air, spreading like a spiderweb around Zhou Tian. Zhou Tian glanced at Chao with mild surprise. Gritting his teeth, Chao directed the currents toward Zhou Tian. At a single point, the fine threads converged into a pillar as thick as an arm hurtling toward him. Zhou Tian's eyes lit up. But before the electric pillar could reach him, a massive rock interposed itself. The seemingly powerful pillar only left a deep crater on the rock's surface before dissipating. Despair washed over Chao. Zhou Tian frowned thoughtfully, then turned his gaze to the 2 he had captured. I ask, you answer. I can detect your mental fluctuations. If you lie, you die, Zhou Tian said, his moon-white pupils devoid of emotion. What are your evolution percentages? 87, 95, 76. Ku Yi finally managed to control his mouth. Mystic ability. Resonating with electrons in the air, I can gather them to unleash hundreds of thousands of volts. Mediocre. You. Zhou Tian shook his head, but looked at Chao with a peculiar glint. I can slightly alter the time flow around me, accelerating it up to 5 times. That's not bad, Zhou Tian nodded. Can you slow it down, or reverse it? No. Still mediocre. Nonsense, Ku Yi thought. Who has such a monstrous ability like you? Wen Yunyun stirred behind. So comfortable. Am I lying on, huh? Wen Yunyun stretched, then noticed 3 people staring at her. We'll talk later. I'm almost done here. Zhou Tian's tense expression finally softened slightly as he turned. Last question. How many of those who snatched the gray heart-shaped mystic seed from you are still alive? Zhou Tian looked at Ku Yi. Ku Yi instantly understood and yelled, you're the cliff-jumping madman. Answer the question. None. Just me left. Ku Yi gritted his teeth. Good. Then you can die. Zhou Tian grinned. No. You. With a sharp crack, Ku Yi's neck twisted grotesquely, his head turning to face Chao. Chao was too terrified to speak, feeling a warm stream uncontrollably wet his pants. As for you. Zhou Tian looked at Chao. You can go. Huh. Chao stared at Zhou Tian in disbelief. He'll count to 3. If you don't leave, you'll end up. Zhou Tian released his hold on Chao, who collapsed to the ground from weak legs. But he desperately pushed himself up with his hands leaning against the wall as he shuffled away. Once Chao was far off, Zhou Tian turned to Wen Yunyun. To his surprise, her face showed no shock, confusion, or disgust. Only sympathy and sadness. You. Don't think I did wrong. Zhou Tian was taken aback. What? You mean letting that guy go? I don't know why you spared him. Unless you have a thing for him. No, I mean killing those people. I let him go because his ability had something special. It'd be a shame to... Oh. Wen Yunyun shook her head. Well, it's not real anyway. I'd still do it in the real world, Zhou Tian said, looking at her. Then there's no choice. If we don't kill them, they'll kill us, right? Wen Yunyun was silent for a long time. Zhou Tian looked at the girl. Next time he'll kill fewer. Aren't you afraid? Wen Yunyun asked curiously. I was terrified just watching. Why are you so indifferent to killing? Have you killed in real life? No. I'm just an ordinary person in reality. Zhou Tian shook his head. As a spiritual evolutionist, controlling emotions is basic. No matter how disgusted, terrified, or scared I am, it won't affect what we need to do. I see. Is it hard? Not really. Oh, by the way, what exactly is your ability? Wen Yunyun suddenly, simply put, I use spiritual power to manipulate objects. Living beings with spiritual power can't be directly controlled, but I can launch spiritual attacks. The range depends on the strength of my spiritual power, Zhou Tian said. Anything works? Wen Yunyun asked. Nothing hasn't worked so far. Zhou Tian thought for a moment. Oh, it might also have some hallucinogenic effects. Probably because I integrated my insights from the illusion evolution during self-awakening. What's your ability? I can assemble anything from available materials, tools, weapons, etc. I tell you, if this place weren't so cramped with only stones, I could defeat them all on my own with enough materials outside, Wen Yunyun said, arms crossed. Yes, impressive. Zhou Tian was noncommittal. His attitude infuriated Wen Yunyun. Just you'll build a weapon that can blast you to pieces. Time ticked by. After Zhou Tian's awakening, both felt more relaxed. Barring accidents, they would smoothly pass the second stage. Wen Yunyun had been worried, but seeing Zhou Tian's individual data left her speechless. She couldn't fathom how two mystic users could be so different. Zhou Tian himself wasn't bothered. According to Wen Yunyun's calculation model, there were many on his level. On the last day of the second stage, mystic seeds appeared far less frequently. The spectacular sight of colorful lights filling the sky in the first 3 days was gone. Wen Yunyun chose to wait in place for the stage to end, while Zhou Tian continued meditating. An illusory scene blurred the cave entrance. Zhou Tian's doing. In his words, illusions were more useful than telekinesis. The long 7 days finally passed. Zhou Tian opened his eyes and glanced at the data on his arm guard. Individual, named Zhou Tian. Spiritual evolution direction, telekinetic formula. Current progress, 236. Comprehensive evaluation, 3812. In a small town not far from where Zhou Tian lived, an elderly couple slowly awoke from their slumber in an ordinary home. The sunlight just managed to squeeze through the gaps in the windows, signaling that dawn had barely broken. The old couple opened their eyes, still somewhat dazed. After a few minutes, it was the wife who spoke first. Old man, I had such a long, strange dream. Me too. The husband said, uncertainty in his voice. I dreamed I entered some kind of selection and was fighting others for something. A mystic seed. Yes, but I didn't get it, and then I woke up. How did you know? Because I had the same dream. The husband was startled. Hey, old woman, why is your hair black? Old man, your wrinkles seem to have faded. The elderly couple stared at each other in shock. What was happening? How had a single night's sleep made them young again? Suddenly, the phone on the nightstand began to vibrate. The wife put on her reading glasses, but felt dizzy and took them off. She fumbled for the phone and saw it was a video call. After pressing the answer button, a graceful silver-haired girl appeared on the screen. Jiao Amin Su Minli, greetings to you both. The girl said with a smile. Who are you? The elderly couple asked, puzzled as to how this young lady knew their name. I am Mona, an artificial intelligence from Morosha. It is regrettable that you were eliminated in the second stage of selection. However, individuals who pass the first stage are all beings with potential. Even if eliminated, you retain the right to preserve your evolutionary progress. Mona's smile was flawless, but her voice remained as emotionless as it had been in the inheritance tower. Our dream. Was it real? The wife's hands trembled as she held the phone. Yes, it was. Moreover, I must inform you of one thing. Since your direct descendant has successfully passed the second stage and entered the final trial, you are entitled to watch the live broadcast of this individual's entire third stage selection. A sly glint gradually appeared in Mona's smiling expression. Xiao Tian. Do you mean Xiao Tian has passed the second stage? The husband said excitedly. Yes. Please confirm if you wish to exercise this right. Mona asked. Yes, the wife quickly replied. Voice print confirmed. The right to watch the live broadcast of individual Zhou Tian's third stage has been granted. Mona nodded. May the starry sky be with you. With that, the phone screen went dark. At the same time, a cacophony of noise came from the living room. The television, which had been turned off, had somehow turned on by itself. Without even changing out of their pajamas, the elderly couple rushed to the living room and saw a familiar figure on the screen. They covered their mouths in shock. Meanwhile, the global situation was growing increasingly chaotic. Many people who had previously disappeared reappeared, bringing with them a series of unimaginable events. First, the second batch of awakened individuals were exactly 7 hours later than the first. Second, those who had just awakened muttered incomprehensible terms like inheritance, evolution, and mystic seed. Finally, some awakened individuals displayed incredible abilities. One punched a person trying to help them into a wall, while another leaped from a 7th-floor window without a scratch. The events of this period were already maddening, but what followed defied all imagination. Screens in Times Square, movie theaters, private phones, and computers. Every display capable of showing an image. simultaneously featured a silver-haired girl who began to calmly narrate truths that shattered the world's understanding. After her explanation, the displays began showing familiar scenes. Unlike the elderly couple who could watch a specific individual, most displays worldwide only showed a macroscopic view. If the couple's viewing experience was like a carefully edited film, what most people saw was merely surveillance footage. And Jiao Tian likely had no idea that his every move was being watched by his parents. Where's this? Jiao Tian looked around his surroundings in shock. When the countdown for the second stage ended, the space he was in had changed without any warning. Familiar bed, familiar desk lamp, familiar bookshelves, and chairs. He looked around and confirmed that this place was identical to his own room. Have I been eliminated and returned to reality? Jiao Tian frowned, but something felt off. Moon-white spiritual energy materialized around Jiao Tian, radiating outward to envelop the entire building. Under the probe of his spiritual sense, nothing could remain hidden. There's nothing around. This isn't reality. Jiao Tian understood. Just then his arm guard suddenly vibrated, and a familiar voice sounded. Recipient X26852, congratulations on passing the second stage selection. The following is an explanation for the final stage. The same emotionless voice continued, the third stage begins. The selection environment will change to familiar scenes on this planet. Everyone will be placed at their coordinates from before entering the inheritance tower. Your task is to hunt down other inheritors. The voice was flat and cold. What? Even Jiao Tian couldn't help but be shocked. Killing one inheritor will earn you 100 kill points. The inheritance arm guard will unlock a purchase function. Points can be used to buy weapons and items to improve hunting efficiency. When an individual accumulates 100 points, they can choose to end the inheritance or continue hunting. The higher the hunting score, the greater the rewards after ending the inheritance. Note, regardless of how many points an individual has once killed, there is no redemption. They will immediately lose all points and be eliminated. The entire third stage will last 30 Earth days, with an additional rule added on the 5th, 15th, and 25th days respectively. Special reminder: those eliminated in the second and third stages will retain their evolutionary progress, but cannot continue to receive subsequent inheritance. Mystic seeds fused within the tower will not be retained. Upon elimination, they will awaken immediately. Here is the reward list for ending inheritance at various point thresholds. 100 to 100 points, the inheritor awakens with full inheritance and mystic seeds and receives Morosha, first star Duke citizenship. 100 to 100 points, the inheritor awakens with full inheritance and mystic seeds, receives Morosha, second star Duke citizenship, and is gifted one inheritance arm guard. 100 to 500 points, the inheritor awakens with full inheritance and mystic seeds, receives Morosha, third star Duke citizenship, is gifted one inheritance arm guard, and 3 random mystic seeds. 50 to 100 points, the inheritor awakens with full inheritance and mystic seeds, receives the identity of Morosha, first star executive, is gifted 2 inheritance arm guards, and 10 self-selected mystic seeds. Over 100 points, receive all the above rewards plus 1 inheritance tower. Jiao Tian stared at the last item on the list and drew a sharp breath. An inheritance tower. Madness, absolute madness. Was an entire inheritance tower being offered as a reward? Its value had to exceed even that of Earth itself. Though there were 12800 inheritance towers on Earth, each was the crystallization of a civilization far surpassing humanity. Setting aside the technology within the tower itself, the mere fact that it could bestow inheritance upon any individual made its value incalculable. Imagine, with enough time, allowing those on Earth who had not yet succeeded in inheritance to enter the tower again would exponentially increase the number of qualified inheritors. And when future newborns were raised and trained from childhood, the potential of each would be boundless. In short, possessing an inheritance tower meant laying the strongest foundation for a civilization's future. Even the owner could slowly study the countless inheritances within. Even without talent in certain directions, time could wear down any obstacle. Meanwhile, the outside world was in an uproar. Leaders of major nations were slamming their tables. An inheritance tower. The highest reward is an entire tower from an alien civilization. Use every means. We must secure this for our country. Order the military. Prepare for nuclear strikes on targets. Hurry. Issue a presidential decree. Have intelligence monitor the top inheritors and contact their family. By order of the king. The already chaotic situation grew even more tense. And the origin of it all watched the current spectacle on this planet with great amusement. Let chaos reign, let chaos reign. Only in the most turbulent scenes can true power be forged. After a brief moment of shock, Jiao Tian quickly regained his composure. The Heritage Tower is excellent, but the conditions for obtaining its rewards are extremely harsh. He shook his head. Over 100 million points. Killing a single person only yields 100 points. Doesn't that mean one would need to slay over 1 million individuals? This was evidently an impossibility. Not to mention whether the number of third-phase inheritors in each region even reached 1,000,000, even if 1,000,000 stood still for the slaughter finishing them within 30 days, was highly doubtful. Since this was an utterly unattainable feat, yet such a reward condition was presented, the only possibility lay in the 3 supplementary rules to be added later. Zhou Tian stared at the rule description interface, lost in thought. The entire third phase of the inheritance will last 30 Earth days, with 1 supplementary rule added on the 5th, 15th, and 25th days respectively. If nothing unexpected occurred, these 3 supplementary rules would offer opportunities to amass points rapidly in a short time. Otherwise, even meeting the minimum requirement of 100 points would be improbable, let alone the maximum of 100 million. Thus, for at least 5 days, he need not be too busy. Yet there was one matter that unsettled him. Wen Yunyun. She had vanished. According to the rules, Wen Yunyun would appear in the same location as he did before entering the tower, corresponding to reality. Shortly after arriving here, they had been separated, and he had no idea where she was. Though the girl was but a chance acquaintance during the past few days when Zhou Tian underwent self-awakening, Wen Yunyun had been protecting him, especially at the critical moment. If not for Wen Yunyun fighting against overwhelming odds, even being beaten into unconsciousness, Zhou Tian might have been disrupted or even forced to abort his awakening. He felt deeply grateful for her actions. Yet now she was forcibly separated from him. A non-combat type evolver adrift in such a chaotic inheritance space. How could it not be perilous? Both emotionally and rationally, Zhou Tian was unwilling to see the girl suffer any harm. Thus, he silently resolved to find her whenever he had the chance. Fortunately, based on the distribution of the heritage towers, those who met within the same tower hailed from the same region in reality. This meant Wen Yunyun could not be too far away. Assuming this virtual space was a 1-1 replica of Earth with 12800 heritage towers evenly scattered across its surface, then according to Earth's surface area of 510 million square kilometers. The area he occupied should be a 4,000 square kilometer region centered on the tower. 40,000 square kilometers. That was nearly 4 times the size of his own city. Zhou Tian's head ached at the thought. How long would this search take? Moreover, he had no idea how many inheritors, now secret force wielders, were scattered across this expanse. And those with such powers were not to be trifled with. Forget it. There was no good solution for now. Zhou Tian decided to stop dwelling on it. At worst, he would sweep through the area methodically. His spiritual power was well suited for such a task. Glancing around the familiar room, he casually pulled a book from the shelf and opened it. The pages were blank. It seemed not everything could be simulated here. He then lay down on the bed. The sensation of resting on a mattress could indeed be replicated. How nostalgic. Satisfied, Zhou Tian simply began to sleep. Outside the screen, Zhou Tian's parents exchanged bewildered looks. This lazy child, his mother said, speechless. At a time like this, he's still thinking about sleeping. Don't you know his nature? He's been indolent since childhood, his father remarked with a smile. He takes after you, his mother retorted with a glare. After a quick wash and tidy up, Zhou Tian's mother stepped out. Though mentally prepared, the scene outside still left her somewhat at a loss. The appearance of the Heritage Tower hadn't drastically affected their small county, but the proclamation broadcast across all media had undoubtedly sparked global panic. Many were packing their belongings and fleeing with their families, clogging the county streets by 7 or 8. And after a struggle to reach the market, Zhou Tian's mother found vendors sparse, mostly elderly, without smart. Having finally bought groceries and returned home, she discovered Zhou Tian still asleep. The old couple thus spent the entire day watching their son slumber. By evening, Zhou Tian's father could no longer hold out. Yawning, he said, "I can't take it anymore. This rascal can really sleep. He'll rest first, you should too." Zhou Tian's mother waited a while longer, but seeing no sign of him waking, she gradually drifted off on the sofa. The moment she fell into deep sleep, Zhou Tian himself awoke and eerily glanced toward the non-existent. From the television's perspective, it seemed as though Zhou Tian knew he was being watched and looked directly outward. In truth, he was unaware that his parents were observing him. Yet from the very beginning, he had sensed a vague feeling of being spied upon. Only after his parents fell asleep did that inexplicable sensation dissipate, prompting him to rouse from his shallow meditative state. Whether in reality or the virtual world, the night offered natural camouflage. From any angle, venturing out under its cover was the wiser choice. Zhou Tian closed his eyes, and a moon-white radiance emerged, enveloping him in a wide hooded robe. The outer layer was deep blue, reminiscent of the ocean depths or the night sky, while the inner lining was pitch black, dotted with starlight, like a celestial vault. The robe was crafted from a silk-like material, and as Zhou Tian drew the hood, he was entirely concealed. Yet the light did not fade. A mask shaped like 2 crescent moons materialized on his face, obscuring most of his features and leaving only those moon-white eyes to gaze eerily outward. He examined himself in the mirror and nodded with satisfaction. This was no magic that conjured garments from nothing, merely an illusion that distorted perception. As long as the observer was not a spiritual evolver like Zhou Tian, or possessed superior spiritual power they could not see through his true appearance. Once disguised, Zhou Tian stepped onto the balcony and soared into the air on a trail of moon-white light. His spiritual power silently swept the surroundings as he hovered beneath the moonlight like a sovereign descending amidst the stars. One had to admit this virtual world was astonishingly real. Even the celestial dome rotated just like the real sky. Perhaps it was a direct projection of actual starlight. After a thorough probe, Zhou Tian confirmed that within a 2-kilometer radius from his origin, 4 individuals, alas, his spiritual power was still too weak, reaching a maximum of 2 kilometers. In the future, as it grew, extending across an entire city might not be impossible, but for now it remained a distant dream. Zhou Tian had no intention of engaging these 4. Instead, he silently observed their actions. He had been a patient person since childhood. As a boy, to buy a remote-controlled car, he had saved 1 yuan a day for an entire year. Defeating those 4 was no great challenge for Zhou Tian, but compared to a mere 4 points, there were more meaningful pursuits, such as gathering intelligence or observing how others wielded their secret force. Though the inheritance provided methods to acquire secret force, it offered no guidance on how to utilize it. Like Zhou Tian, most people used their secret force crudely, relying solely on its attributes. Zhou Tian suspected that the use of secret force should not be so rough. One individual proved his theory, a man named Chowan. Though his secret force was relatively weak, Zhou Tian had witnessed technique in his application, which astonished him. This was why he had let Chowan go. He wanted to see how far the man could push his modest power. Zhou Tian's current observation was also an attempt to glean inspiration from others. On the first day of the 3rd phase, nothing eventful occurred within his detection range. On the 2nd day, the number of people in his range increased to 6. 2 clashed, apparently physical evolvers, and a building collapsed during their conflict. Fearing they might attract attention, the 2 then parted ways. On the 3rd day, the active count rose to 9, and the first elimination occurred. 3 individuals ganged up on a physical evolver. The process was swift, especially the leader's ruthless strikes and the sudden burst of secret force that even made Zhou Tian feel threatened. He made a mental note of this person. On the 4th day, an unexpected event unfolded. Of the 8 remaining in his range, 2 departed, and the other 6 erupted into a 3v3 team battle. The trio from the previous day barely won, with 2 severely injured. The leader, after finishing off the opposing 3, turned on his own wounded comrades. By Zhou Tian's count, this person had accumulated 600 points, raising his estimation of the man another notch. On the 5th day, the supplementary rule arrived as promised. A clear, cold voice echoed in the ears of all surviving 3rd phase participants. Attention, announcement of the first supplementary rule for Phase 3 begins. Supplementary Rule 1, after killing another participant, the killer will acquire half of the victim's points and all redeemed items. Redeemed items can be converted back into points at an 80 value. This rule takes effect immediately. Just as expected, the 3 supplementary rules were almost certainly designed to boost kill rewards while spurring participants into active combat, enabling them to reach those seemingly astronomical reward thresholds. This rule had already greatly enhanced point acquisition efficiency, especially for the strong. Killing a powerful opponent would yield 10 times more rewards than taking down a weakling. The first 2 phases focused on cultivation and enhancement, but the 3rd phase was a blatant encouragement of mutual slaughter. After a 5-day warm-up, the game was finally about to begin. Beneath his mask, Zhou Tian's moon-white eyes rippled with an uncanny light. A thunderous roar echoed across the sky of this residential district. Zhou Tian was staring intently at the adversary before him. The man's forearms had transformed into scythe-like blades. With a casual sweep of his arms, he effortlessly sliced through the flying debris in front of him. Looking closely at the man's eyes, his original single pupils had split into honeycomb-like compound eyes, occupying almost all the space of the eye whites, appearing ferocious and terrifying. Countless reflections of Zhou Tian were cast within those compound eyes. Watching Zhou Tian suspended in midair, the man's back bulged, and a pair of insect wings sprouted from his spine. He then also soared into the sky. Witnessing this, Zhou Tian frowned. This man was one of the new troublemakers in this area, and had been chasing him for nearly an hour. It was now the 6th day since the 3rd phase began. Approximately 30 hours had passed since the first supplementary rule took effect. As Zhou Tian had predicted, this rule greatly stimulated the inheritors. Those who had been lying low began to make contact. The battles Zhou Tian alone had detected numbered nearly 100. This man was one Zhou Tian had detected an hour ago. To his surprise, the moment Zhou Tian's spiritual sense swept over him, the man immediately detected his presence, locked onto his position, and charged towards him like a madman. What troubled Zhou Tian was the man's formidable speed and stamina. Using his peculiar spiritual abilities, Zhou Tian had engaged him for a long time, but couldn't defeat or shake him off. Forced to fly into the air, he hadn't expected the man to grow wings from his back. Stop struggling. The man's voice was grating like two hard objects scraping against each other. Your turns are agile, but your straight-line speed is too slow. You'll be caught eventually. Hey, Mantis Man, Jotion tilted his head and asked. I haven't provoked you, have I? I don't even have any points. Why keep chasing me relentlessly? The man had a triangular head and scythe-like forearms, indeed, resembling a mantis. You're a spiritual energy evolver, right? The man didn't get angry at being called Mantis Man. Licking his lips, he continued. I'm so lucky. You're the second one I've encountered. Oh, you've encountered another spiritual energy evolver. Jotion frowned. Since the inheritance began, he had mostly seen physical evolvers and a few intellectual evolvers. Apart from himself, he hadn't encountered a single spiritual energy evolver. Yes, and I ate him. The Mantis Man grinned, revealing saw-like teeth. Eating a spiritual energy evolver did me a lot of good. I have resistance to spiritual energy now. You can't beat me. Come and die obediently. Eat. You're a physical devourer type. Jotion was shocked. The devourer type was a rare and extremely dangerous branch of physical evolution. If evolving according to a formula was like following a program step by step, then devourer evolvers were bugs. Unlike other evolvers, devourer evolvers could enhance themselves by consuming the secret power seeds of others. This drove them to attack their kind with insane ferocity, and their growth rate far surpassed other evolvers. In an ancient civilization, a devourer evolver who reached the later stages had consumed countless powerhouses, causing a calamity across a star domain. He eventually evolved into a monster difficult to describe in words. No one knew the original form of that evolver. His body bore characteristics of almost all biological types in the universe. He was massive and bloated like a tumor growing on the land of an ordinary planet. Countless alien limbs flailed wildly in space, yet the secret power fluctuations emanating from his hideous form were potent enough to annihilate a weak civilization with ease. Eventually, one of the most powerful civilizations of that era intervened, cutting him into 9 parts and casting each into a separate black hole. Even so, they couldn't kill him completely. His 9 parts let out unwilling roars, but were ultimately drawn in by the immense gravity of the black holes, banished for eternity. From then on, all civilizations regarded devourer evolvers with extreme caution and began to suppress them. This was partly due to their terrifying evolution speed and aggression, and partly because almost all devourer evolvers were utterly irrational madmen. Fortunately, such evolvers were extremely rare, even rarer than spiritual energy evolvers, keeping them somewhat controllable. And today, a living devourer evolver stood before him. Jotion stared at the man who looked like a mantis. The Mantis Man exuded a dangerous aura. He could sense the intensity of Jotion's secret power. Before devouring that unfortunate curse-type spiritual energy evolver, his own secret power was slightly weaker. Now it was a notch stronger than this telekinetics. This was the horror of devourer evolvers. In terms of growth rate alone, they were truly unparalleled in the universe. You don't think that just because your secret power looks a bit stronger than mine you can defeat me, do you, eh? Jotion looked at the man who already regarded him as a meal, feeling quite irritated. Victory isn't decided by words. Die. The Mantis Man flapped his wings. The insect wings on his back vibrated at an extremely high frequency, allowing him to close in on Jotion's position within seconds. This man was indeed faster than Jotion. After all, Jotion moved through the air, using spiritual energy propulsion, while the man relied on his evolved wings. He must not let this man get close. In the void, the moon-white spiritual energy instantly solidified, forming a fist-like shape that slammed towards the Mantis Man. The Mantis Man parried with his scythe forearms, cutting through the moon-white fist with little resistance. Jotion wasn't surprised. The dispersed spiritual energy recondensed, forming countless sharp blades that continuously attacked the Mantis Man. This was the peculiarity of spiritual energy. Physical attacks caused it almost no depletion. Only the collision of 2 different spiritual energies would cause rapid consumption. As a telekinetic evolver, Jotion could do much more. The surrounding debris, glass and steel, all matter he could control, levitated like raindrops and then hurtled madly towards the Mantis Man. The dual assault of spiritual blades and material projectiles finally troubled the Mantis Man. He wildly swung his forearms to block, but ultimately retreated awkwardly into a building for shelter. Coward, the Mantis Man snarled in frustration. You bastard who only attacks from afar. Dare to fight me like a man. Jotion found this baffling. It was common knowledge that close combat was a weakness for spiritual energy evolvers. Did he want a spiritual energy evolver to fight up close? Jotion looked at him as if he were an idiot. Seeming to realize how stupid his words sounded, the Mantis Man ground his teeth even harder. But Jotion suddenly smiled and said, fine. You want close combat. Don't regret it. The Mantis Man was stunned, then watched as Jotion flew straight towards him, ecstatic. He couldn't understand why a telekinetic would want to fight up close, but if the other sought death, he was happy to oblige. Ignoring the still incoming blades and debris, the Mantis Man launched himself, striking towards Jyotion's approach. If I eat just one more spiritual energy evolver, I might evolve a spiritual attack ability. Then I'll have no weaknesses in close or range combat. Who in this area can threaten me then? He howled, internally abandoning almost all defense as he brought his forearms down upon Jyotion. When the forearm touched Jyotion, he was split apart effortlessly like cutting through air. What? The Mantis Man was bewildered. Then the Jyotion that was torn apart dissipated on the spot, replaced by several fierce spiritual blades. At such close range they were nearly impossible to dodge. No, you. The Mantis Man was instantly filled with terror. His compound eye sockets almost split open from the strain. Puff, puff, puff. With a few soft sounds like a knife piercing a pillow, the spiritual blades easily penetrated through his compound eyes, turning his brain into a mushy pulp. His lifeless body plummeted from the air. No way. He fell for such a crude illusion. The real Jyotion materialized from the environment, shaking his head. Strong secret power, but his technique was far too crude. As a self-awakened individual, Jyotion's ability was never simple telekinesis. It also possessed some illusory effects, though certainly not comparable to a true illusion evolver. He just hadn't expected the man to be so easily deceived. His arm guard suddenly buzzed. Jyotion raised his wrist and saw his score on the screen jump from 0 to 180. So the Mantis Man had already killed 16 people. Jyotion raised an eyebrow. Individual named Jyotion. Points change detected. Malfunction has been activated. A conspicuous icon appeared beside the points, and Jyotion casually clicked it open. Instantly, a dazzling array of redeemable items materialized before him. Initially, Jyotion remained composed, but the further he scrolled, the heavier his breathing became. Star Copper Dagger, 10 points, each capable of cutting items with a hardness of 5 Mohs. For reference, ordinary stainless steel has a hardness of 5 Mohs. Carlos Battle Blade, 300 points each, can effortlessly cleave through objects of 18 Mohs hardness. Thermal Weaponry Basic Grade Dark Energy Meteor Cannon, 450 points per unit, capable of precisely eliminating all life forms buried deeper than 500 meters. Thermal Weaponry Enhanced Grade Flame Burst Rifle, 0 points, each specialized bullets at 50 points per round, effective against masters below the level of those protected by defensive artifacts and secret force. Defensive Gear Flowing Shadow Suit, 1500 points, defense rating of 30 Mohs with integrated stealth capability. Defensive Gear Mobile Stellar Grade Barrier 3. 5 million points, defense rating of 30 Mohs. Good heavens, Jyotion sighed. I initially thought these items were merely embellishments, but it turns out they are the decisive factors in determining the final outcome. Indeed, without the existence of items, individual capability would be the most crucial indicator for the third stage of selection. However, judging from these items, a single star cannon could easily annihilate all burgeoning secret force users like Jyotion despite its exorbitant price. It is undeniably a determining element in this selection. This was in fact the original intention of the trial's designers, that there is always a glimmer of opportunity. One can be weak, yet still win through these items and fortuitous encounters. Although under normal circumstances the points a successor can acquire are proportional to their strength, there are always exceptions, often referred to as fortunate ones. Fortune generally does not represent true ability, and luck itself is an intangible concept, yet sometimes its existence cannot be denied. For instance, a plane crashes, leaving passengers with no chance of survival, yet a few miraculously live, or survivors of 2 consecutive nuclear blasts unaffected by radiation and living long lives on a battlefield riddled with bullets, soldiers around are turned into sieves, while one remains unscathed. These are recorded events in history, and their protagonists are uniformly called fortunate ones. The existence of the points system and the marketplace is also to provide more opportunities for these fortunate ones, for luck is truly unpredictable. You can be weak, but with the blessing of fortune you may defeat someone far stronger or accomplish the impossible. At certain times these fortunate ones can even become turning points in history. So for now, most items in this marketplace are not meant for Jyotion. Taking a deep breath to control his avaricious thoughts, Jyotion closed the marketplace interface. Though tempted, he decided to focus on the immediate matters. It was only the 6th day, and the successors were already killing so frequently. The remaining 20-plus days would surely be even more intense. However, Jyotion was also curious about one thing: were these weapons merely virtual creations of this inheritance space, or did they exist in reality, even within the inheritance tower? If the latter, the motive for their appearance on Earth might not be so simple. In the following days, Jyotion became even more cautious. In the 2 days after defeating the Mantis Man, he encountered several other successors, but avoided conflict. The frequent battles of these days led to the swift elimination of the weak. Those who remained were mostly individuals with considerable strength, and almost all survivors had enough points to exchange for basic items, making everyone more cautious. Unbeknownst to them, their every action was being watched by people on Earth. In the first stage of inheritance, time inside the tower was 30 days, but only 30 minutes passed in reality. In the second stage, 7 days inside the tower corresponded to 7 hours in reality. However, in the third stage, the time ratio was 1:1. So when Jiutian experienced 7 days in the third stage, 7 days also passed in the real world. During these 7 days, the world underwent earth-shattering changes. All functioning electronic displays showed live broadcasts of the respective regions. The participants in the third stage were being watched in real time like contestants in a talent show. Except for events involving privacy, which were automatically obscured, the rest of the time was laid bare for, but human attention is limited. The events in a single region in one day alone were dazzling, and the information from a staggering 1,280 regions was overwhelming, making it impossible for ordinary people to keep up daily. Soon numerous media outlets began compiling intelligence summaries. Many concise daily digests spread across the internet, while more detailed versions required payment. The readership and purchase volume of this intelligence far exceeded regular news by hundreds of times, plunging the entire world into the frenzy of watching the third stage slaughter. Major powers and government leaders had dedicated personnel for more specific intelligence summaries, with think tanks analyzing the information. Among all participants, a red-haired girl shone like a rising sun. She had an Asian face and striking red hair. Whether it was natural remained unknown. In her region of the inheritance tower, she dominated everyone else with overwhelming force. The situation in her area was unique. For instance, in Jiutian's region, the typical pattern was normal fighting, with the stronger ones emerging, then growing through a process of big fish eating small fish, culminating in a victor. But in the red-haired girl's region, it was like a shark. No, it was like placing a Hoffman's mosasaur among a school of minnows. There was no concept of gradual growth in her area. After a peaceful first day, some unfortunate soul noticed this seemingly delicate girl and harbored some ill intentions. By the time he realized the kind of existence he had provoked, it was too late. Blazing crimson flames instantly consumed everything around. The poor man didn't even have time to scream before being vaporized on the spot. The terrifying heat warped the surrounding space. Fiery serpents writhed wildly, destroying all in their path, turning rock and earth into molten lava. The girl, her red hair dancing in the flames, strolled out from the curtain of fire like an empress reigning over heaven and earth. Soon this awe-inspiring scene was recorded and spread worldwide. All major forces immediately began analyzing and identifying the girl. Netizens were utterly thrilled by the sight. Scenes like this were previously only found in movies, weren't they? Subsequently, the girl swept through all successors in her region who dared challenge her. Few could withstand her flames for more than 3 seconds, cementing her dominance. Because of her red hair, flames, and domineering style, some netizens dubbed her the Scarlet Flame Queen. Over the next week, many exceptionally talented successors came into the spotlight. Especially after the 5th-day battles erupted more frequently, and hidden masters began to emerge. After a week, several of the world's most renowned media outlets jointly released the first Top 100 Successors white paper. This ranking even invited some successors who performed well in the second and third stages, but were eliminated by accidents, to provide authoritative analysis, including the unfortunate man who had provoked the red-haired girl. However, as this global reality show intensified, some troubling issues began to surface. As more people were eliminated in the third stage, more successors awakened with their inherited memories, some of whom were genuinely powerful. Once people gained power and authority, their desires swelled. Crime rates skyrocketed worldwide, with the vast majority of incidents perpetrated by eliminated successors. Although successors eliminated in the second and third stages could not possess secret force seeds, they retained their evolutionary progress. The destruction they could cause was far beyond what ordinary police could handle. Governments were forced to hire fellow evolvers as security forces, but their numbers were far too few compared to the unbridled criminals. Strangely, just as this situation was escalating, the rampaging evolvers suddenly vanished without a trace. Days passed one after another, and the second phase quickly concluded. 14 days. The list of the top 100 inheritors was updated, yet Jiutian was still not on the roster. This was hardly surprising. With countless inheritance spaces worldwide broadcasting live simultaneously, only the most dazzling inheritors could capture attention, and Jiutian himself was quite low-key. Over the past 10+ days, Jiutian seemed to exist outside the mundane world. Besides his battle with the Mantis Man, he had only made 5 moves on days 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13 respectively. In these 5 battles, Jiutian did not employ his illusionary abilities. He fought solely with his telekinetic power, and each opponent he selected was no weakling. One of them was even among the strongest in the region. Other inheritors in Jiutian's area began to notice that the pressure had somehow eased in recent days. Several previously domineering powerhouses had suddenly vanished without a trace. In a desolate, uninhabited ruin, Jiutian sat cross-legged, floating silently in midair. 6 crystalline blue daggers orbited around him. The robe and mask simulated by his illusion appeared more vivid and tangible than a few days ago. After an unknown length of time, he let out a long breath. Turning his hand to glance at his arm guard, it displayed his current points 9210. The further the third phase progressed, the more points one gained for defeating an opponent. In the past 10+ days, Zhou Tian had fought only 5 times, yet obtained 3-0 points, with yesterday's battle yielding the highest single haul. The man other evolvers called Demon Hammer was indeed formidable. Zhou Tian was forced to use his full strength to defeat him. He was called Demon Hammer because he wielded a giant hammer artifact, and almost no one could withstand a direct blow. Zhou Tian had to use a mental shock to find an opening. Such was the terror of a psychic evolver. In distant Morosha, psychics were classified as the most enigmatic and troublesome. One could never predict their methods of attack. Psychic power cannot directly affect a living body with a soul, but it can affect the clothing and items worn. Thus, some psychic evolvers skilled in assassination could even control the armor or artifacts protecting an enemy's vital points, turning them into weapons. Imagine, armor meant to protect you and artifacts meant to enhance your strength become the very instruments piercing your own flesh. What a disgrace that would be. When psychic power is etherealized to a certain degree, it can also deliver a mental impact on the target's soul, causing their thoughts to stall or fall into a daze. An almost indefensible attack. Zhou Tian had only recently discovered these abilities. Otherwise, dealing with Demon Hammer would have been far more. Without a teacher to guide him, many abilities during the explosive growth period after becoming a Mystic Force user had to be explored on his own. For a self-awakened like Zhou Tian, some powers might never have been recorded before. Demon Hammer himself had 5000 points. In Jushian's hands, they were halved to 2500 plus 100 for the kill, totaling 2600 points. But the hammer itself after conversion was worth a full 4300 points. Combined, Demon Hammer alone contributed 6900 points. Such was the high reward for defeating a strong opponent. Although the danger was greater, the potential gains tempted many to take the risk. In recent days, Jushian's overall rating had risen to around 4300. Demon Hammer's rating, including his artifact, was also estimated at over 400, though much of that came from the hammer, while Jushian's score was purely his own. Other evolvers he could detect were generally around 300. Within his detection range, Zhou Tian held a considerable advantage. Zhou Tian gazed at the 6 crystalline blue daggers orbiting him. They were star silver daggers he had exchanged for 50 points each, capable of cutting materials with a hardness of 10 moss, equivalent to 15 times that of stainless steel. With these 6 daggers for ranged attacks, he could kill without leaving a trace. Still, points were insufficient. 100,000 were needed just to reach the qualification threshold. At this rate, he would have to slaughter everyone in this area just to barely meet it. Another matter troubled Zhou Tian. Over the past 2 weeks, he had explored more than half of this space, but still found no trace of Wen Yunyun. Could she have been eliminated? However, not all news was bad. Zhou Tian watched as a pale moonlight radiance shimmered beside him. It was during these 5 battles that he finally began to grasp the efficient use of Mystic Force. He owed a debt of inspiration to Chao An, who had attacked him, and Wen Yunyun. Though Chao An's power was weak, his understanding of Mystic Force was in Jushian's eyes superior to most, and that insight sparked Jushian's own progress. Even during his fight with the Mantis Man, Zhou Tian felt that the use of Mystic Force was too crude. By deliberately selecting opponents and engaging in battle, he finally elevated his mastery, the output method of Mystic Force. 3 fundamentals determine a person's strength: the total amount of Mystic Force, the understanding of the universe evolutionary level, and the quality of the Mystic Force seed. The total amount and seed quality directly set the lower limit of one's power, while cosmic understanding had a less intuitive impact. But Chao An could unleash hundreds of thousands of volts from electrons in the air alone. From the start, Zhou Tian found this strange. Neither Chao An's Mystic Force nor his seed quality seemed sufficient to support such a powerful attack. Yet he not only launched it, but did so repeatedly. After much deliberation, Zhou Tian finally discovered the secret psychic power dispersed throughout the body could be released in a special way, unleashing several times its usual potency in a short burst. Starting from a 1-0 multiplier, Zhou Tian could achieve up to a 2-3-fold amplitude. In other words, if the combat portion of his overall rating was 1-0, the amplitude could instantly raise it to 2-3-0, a qualitative leap. Simply put, psychic power is emitted through various gates of the body: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and even tiny pores. By suddenly accelerating the contraction of psychic power at the moment of emission, one can generate a short, crisp burst of explosive force. If Zhou Tian had any basic knowledge of martial arts, he would be astonished to find this technique strikingly similar to the inch force in Kung Fu. But this technique has its limitations. First, to achieve the burst, one must have strong control over their power, sensing each smallest unit of mystic force. Second, the burst places immense strain on the body, and only abilities that can be emitted outside the body are usable. barring most physical evolvers who cannot project their mystic force externally. Third, the output must spike dramatically in a short time, consuming mystic force at a terrifying rate. With Jushian's current psychic reserves, he could sustain a 1.5-fold burst for 5 minutes, but at the maximum 2.3-fold, of only 10 seconds. Yet Zhou felt this was enough for many situations. Even without the terrifying 2.3-fold amplification, maintaining a 1.5-fold increase would have made his battles against the Mantis Man and Demon Hammer far less arduous. But it was not too late. Zhou checked the remaining time in the third phase, about 15 days and 10 hours. With his enhanced strength, it seemed he could venture into slightly more dangerous territories. A thunderous roar erupted as the once towering edifice collapsed in a cascade of ruin. This was the city's central business district, where the complexity of buildings and terrain rivaled any other area, prompting many inheritors to conceal themselves within its labyrinthine depths. At that moment, dozens of figures burst forth from the collapsing skyscraper, some muttering frantically, "Look, the International Tower is down. Wasn't Tai Yong residing in that building? Rumor has it he's amassed nearly 10,000 points. Few dare to cross him, so why did his sanctuary suddenly crumble?" The inheritors nearby whispered among themselves. Destruction of structures was commonplace in this virtual realm, yet the ruin of a powerhouse's domain was a rarity. The bewildered inheritors scattered around noted the event, speculating whether some formidable challenger had come to provoke. Yet as the fleeing figures drew closer, their cries grew clearer. "Run, madman, kill! What is he saying?" The distant inheritors were stunned. A moon-white radiance like a river of stars materialized from nowhere, coalescing into a colossal hand that clenched around the fleeing man. "No." Before he could utter another word, the nearly translucent hand of moon-white spiritual power crushed him, sending flesh and blood splattering. Zhou descended slowly from midair. It was deep night, and the bright moon hung suspended in the sky. His silhouette merged with the lunar orb, terrifying those who had been covertly observing from a distance. What kind of ability was this, to conjure a hand out of thin air and crush someone to death with a single squeeze? Someone recognized the fleeing man, a subordinate of the powerful Tai Yong, a capable right-hand man. Yet before the masked figure, he was no more than a mosquito swatted with ease. Zhou, still wearing his conjured mask and robe, surveyed the surroundings. 6 flying blades materialized, then shot forth in different directions, piercing concrete walls and ground with incredible speed. They weaved through hidden building debris and underground structures, and when all the fleeing figures had fallen, the 6 blades returned to Zhou in near unison. 9 people, barely 3,000 points in total. They were all quite weak. Zhou shook his head. The others trembled as they witnessed the 6 blades with no blind spot slay everyone who had escaped the collapsed building within seconds. Good heavens, where did this ruthless fiend come from? Killing those famous minor leaders yields points much faster, Zhou mused. The Tai Yong he had just slain was a well-known minor chieftain in the area. Killing him, along with selling his equipment, brought in a whopping 4800 points. Yet while points came quickly, the risk of attracting attention also soared. Under the illumination of his spiritual power, the surroundings were laid bare. He knew that his overt killing had roused the vigilance of many, but with his greatly enhanced strength, he paid it little heed. Originally, Zhou aim was simply to sweep the area with his spiritual power to see if when Yun was present. This was the most convenient and effortless method for him to find someone. However, when his spiritual power passed over a certain building, it was detected by the powerful Tai Yong. Having dominated the 3rd stage for over 10 days, this chieftain of many evolvers would never tolerate such a brazen, probing method on his turf. Thus conflict erupted, and they were annihilated by Zhou. In truth, Tai Yong was formidable, no less than Mo Chue. The fact that he could detect Zhou's spiritual power reflection proved his strength, for ordinary evolvers were utterly oblivious to it. But Zhou simply activated a 1.5x amplification and used his spiritual power to overwhelm the strongman to death. The bloodstained reinforced concrete on the ground did not escape Zhou's notice. Under the influence of his spiritual powers, evolution external stimuli had been infinitely dulled. Even witnessing such a gory scene he had caused, his heart remained untouched. As long as he achieved his goal, without violating the rules, he cared not what means he employed. But to others the scene was utterly different. Zhou's swift massacre soon sparked discussions on a small. The inheritors at the scene were struck silent with fear. Next location. Zhou's spiritual power began to sweep over other areas. This ability was indeed convenient. It could bypass physical barriers and project the surroundings directly into his mind, effectively creating a 3-dimensional map that marked all detectable life forms. Zhou's spiritual power scanned another nearby skyscraper, and soon a swarm of cursing evolvers flew out like bees from a disrupted hive. Zhou sighed. Why was there another one who could sense his presence? He flew toward the cursing evolvers. About 10 minutes later, that skyscraper also collapsed with a roar. The outer evolvers witnessing it were stunned. What was happening? Was this still human? Was this a monster? Was he sweeping through skyscrapers to farm points? Jiutian's method was not only visually striking, but also left an unprecedented shock. Soon videos of these scenes spread, transforming from a small-scale discussion into a moderately hot topic on the internet. Mainly because Jiutian's approach was too ostentatious. Who would so blatantly go from building to building picking fights? But Jiutian was innocent. He had merely swept with his spiritual power, and these people cursed and attacked him. He was just defending himself. Collecting points was merely a bonus. Another moon-white hand formed from spiritual power materialized, then slapped down, killing several evolvers in their terrified expressions. That man, he's the mysterious expert who fought Emochue before. Finally, an evolver recognized him. Emochue, the bully from the west. Yes. A while ago I sensed a fight, and went to check. The cloak and mask matched this person exactly. No wonder Emochue hasn't been seen lately. He must have been taken out by that guy. Where did this fellow come from? How come we only heard of him after 10 days? Outside replay footage of Jiutian's earlier battles was also unearthed. Good heavens, is that telekinesis? So cool. Look, Emochue was defeated without even using his full power. Is this an illusion? He can use illusion. With strength like that, he should be able to enter the rankings, right? Doubtful. The top-ranked powerhouses dominate their entire inheritance regions. This guy is still a bit short. Of course, Jiutian was unaware of how the outside world judged him. At the moment, he was fully focused on dealing with the trouble before him. Yet such carnage could not continue indefinitely. Just as Jiutian prepared to expand his spiritual power again, a sword-bearer stepped out from the crowd. Enough. The sword-bearer rose into the air, reaching Jiutian's elevation, and looked him in the eye. You have crossed the line. Oh. Jiutian regarded the sudden appearance with some surprise. And what are you supposed to be? Something that stops you. The man's expression was cold. He grasped the hilt of the sword behind his back and drew it. A cold gleam was born in the night sky, pushing back the pervasive moon-white spiritual power. Then gripping the sword with both hands, he slashed fiercely at Jiutian. It seemed this man had misunderstood something, but Jiutian was too lazy to explain. Fighting was just fighting. Jiutian raised both hands, and building debris flew toward him, hurtling one after another against the oncoming sword light. Yet the debris posed little hindrance to the sword light, barely even weakening it. Jiutian's expression finally turned serious. Moonlight's spiritual power gathered in his palms. He clasped his hands together, and a giant spiritual hand formed, catching the sword light from both sides like a bare-handed sword catch. The moment the spiritual power and sword light met, a shockwave erupted from the point of contact, blasting the still-standing buildings until they tottered precariously. After several seconds, the sword light was consumed. The sword-bearer frowned at Jiutian. This lawless man was more troublesome than he had imagined. What a hassle. I haven't offended you, have I? Jiutian's expression behind the mask turned cold. It's not about enmity. I simply don't want you to continue slaughtering indiscriminately. The sword-bearer shook his head. Oh, as sane are we? Jiutian narrowed his eyes. Where were you when others were slaughtering indiscriminately? They did not attack those vastly weaker on such a scale like you. Your ability makes mass killing too easy. First, they were never my target. They came after me because they were displeased with my spiritual probe. Second, if I could swat you like I swatted them, I doubt you'd be here looking for trouble. Even if you could swat me like them, I would still stop you. The sword-bearer fixed his gaze on Jiutian. That's Wu Jian from the North District. Someone recognized the sudden powerhouse. I heard he has stopped many large-scale massacres in the North District, making it the most peaceful area. It's true, he's making a move against that mysterious man. What courage! Hypocrite! Jiutian retorted. It seems you won't stop. Wu Jian said. I don't oppose the strong preying on the weak, but your indiscriminate attacks deny many a fair. Jiutian started to say something, but his words died in his throat. Not only Jiutian, but everyone worldwide paused in what they were doing. For just moments ago, the 14th day had ended, and the second supplementary rule was about to arrive. The cool voice arrived as promised. Congratulations to all surviving inheritors. You have successfully endured 14 days in the third stage of selection, proving your worth. Yet it is regrettable that most of you will face the end of this inheritance. Below is the explanation of the second supplementary rule. Third stage, second supplementary rule. From the moment this rule takes effect, each inheritance tower will release a simulated abyssal primordial substance. Slaying a first-generation abyssal infected yields 10 million points, a second-generation abyssal infected yields 5 million, a third-generation abyssal infected yields 5,000, and abyssal remnants beyond the third generation yield a flat 1,000 points. Whoever cleanses the abyssal primordial shall directly receive the highest inheritance reward and be additionally honored as a saint of Morosha. This rule takes effect immediately. Inheritors, may the galaxy be with you. As usual, after explaining the rules, the voice fell silent. At the same time, a notification tone sounded from everyone's inheritance armband. Beep, beep, beep. Hundreds, even thousands of notification tones converged, grating on Zhou Tian's nerves. He raised his arm to look. Attention Receptor X26852. Access to data on abyssal primordial substance and abyssal infected has been granted. Please review promptly. Moi. Zhou Tian raised an eyebrow, but before he could read further he was interrupted by exclamations around him. Look at the sky. Zhou Tian followed the sound, and his pupils contracted. The clear night sky, like a flawed canvas, was torn open by something unknown. A fluid substance darker and deeper than the night itself flowed down from the torn rift like blood oozing from a wound in the sky. Countless star-like specks dotted the eerie substance, cascading from the heavens. Its physical properties were bizarre. Those with keen eyes could even see it writhing in subtle, almost imperceptible motions. The moment that substance appeared in the night sky, every cell in Zhou Tian's body screamed a warning he had never felt before. Danger! 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 A roar from the deepest instinct of life warned Zhou Tian never to approach. Flee! 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 As if a soul-shrieking cry echoed in their minds, everyone felt their scalps tighten and tingle. Wu Jian felt his throat go dry as he forced out his question. What is that? What is that? Zhou Tian also yearned for the answer. His extraordinary mental energy practically roared within his mind. He had never seen it react so violently to anything. The eerie substance flowed swiftly, fully emerging from the rift, in less than 10 seconds pooling on the ground into a pitch-black puddle. The black puddle lay still for a moment as if gathering itself, then abruptly shot out countless spikes in all directions like high-pressure water jets spewing endless streams of black liquid. Once the eerie matter splashed around, it began to flow wildly. If one had to describe the scene, it was like a celestial maiden scattering blossoms. Soon people noticed the direction of its advance. It's heading toward the corpses. Someone quick to react exclaimed. Zhou Tian noticed this too. In the third stage of selection, those eliminated had their consciousness return to reality, but their virtual bodies remained. Zhou Tian had initially thought this was to provide opportunities for those with special abilities like evolvers who could control corpses, but now it seemed otherwise. Could it be? Zhou Tian found it hard to believe. The substance spread quickly, and some had already touched the corpses on the ground. The moment it made contact, the eerie matter burrowed into the corpses. Then the corpses began to twitch, eerily swelling rapidly, inflating into balls in an instant, and finally, bang! The swollen corpse exploded. A mere trace of the eerie substance had entered, but from the explosion, countless new eerie matter gushed out. Thus a chain reaction began. Countless corpse explosions rang out one after another, and the expelled eerie matter sought out new bodies. Zhou Tian was currently in the city center where most of the inheritors had gathered. It was also the bloodiest battleground in the entire inheritance tower, leaving thousands of corpses behind. Adding to that, Zhou Tian had just slaughtered some people, leaving fresh bodies exposed. Not only intact corpses, but even severed limbs and blood couldn't escape the eerie matter's consumption. Everyone who witnessed this felt a chill run through their bones. Even being hunted by a strong man couldn't match the despair of this scene. Run! Someone shouted first, and then everyone scattered in panic, fleeing in all directions. Zhou Tian had no intention of contacting that thing either. Both his instinctive aversion and what had just happened signaled its danger. Zhou Tian wanted to turn and leave immediately. Every extra second here increased the threat. But before he could act, a shadow darted past him, not fleeing outward, but charging straight toward the city center. It was Wu Jian who had been confronting Zhou Tian earlier. Now he rushed against the fleeing crowd like a madman. No way. Can a Gouda Twushus go this far? Zhou Tian was stunned. He quickly understood what this man intended. Evolvers had diverse abilities. Some excelled in speed, some in strength, some in ranged attack, some in close combat, and some, though weak in battle, could create and study various tools. This meant everyone's survival chances against the eerie substance varied. Now it seemed most people had little chance of resisting as it spread too fast. What was once a puddle had now become a raging river. Wu Jian was heading toward the slowest runners at the back. Watching his retreating figure, someone flashed through Zhou Tian's mind. Sigh. Zhou Tian felt helpless. Why does he have to come to mind now? Wu Jian, unaware that the strange man he had just fought was watching him, focused entirely on the surging eerie substance ahead. His evolved body trembled uncontrollably, and even the sword he had recently acquired seemed reluctant to face that thing. Yet Wu Jian's gaze remained steady. No matter how his body shook, his hand on the sword stayed firm. As always, he raised the sword above his head and swung it down. This was his strongest move, his only move. A sword light materialized from nowhere, charging fearlessly into the blackness, deeper than night, just like its master. The furious advance of the eerie substance was briefly halted, then the sword light was swallowed. Wu Jian's expression didn't change. He followed with 5 consecutive slashes. 5 arcs of sword light streaked across the night sky, exploding upon contact with the eerie substance. The blast's force finally severed the river's leading wave. Now, run! Wu Jian roared at the pale, trembling individuals behind him, the evolvers he had just shielded with his sword. These were the weaker ones, or those poor at escaping. Gratitude now mingled with their terror, and they bolted away without a second thought. Wu Jian watched them flee and turned to continue blocking the eerie substance, but a shadow attacked from the. He instinctively blocked with his sword and recognized the assailant. Even so, despite everything he had witnessed, Wu Jian was still surprised. The shadow was covered in eerie substance, now striking Wu Jian's blade with both fists. Feeling the immense force through his sword, Wu Jian was taken aback. He recognized this man, one of those who had watched his fight with Zhou Tian from the sidelines, not one of the corpses. Had the eerie substance devoured a living person and turned them into this? Before he could dwell on it, more shadows emerged from the sides, tightening his heart. Not good. Shadows attacked from different directions, but Wu Jian had only one sword. Impossible to defend all sides. Making matters worse, the man whose fist had struck his blade now grabbed the sword tightly, as if ignoring its sharp edge. Wu Jian even saw a grim, eerie smile on his dull face. Looks like this is the end. Unwilling to become like those zombie-like beings, Wu Jian immediately placed his sword against his own neck. He had his pride. He would rather take his own life than be consumed by that eerie thing. The starlight gleaming azure dagger traced an elegant arc, slicing with lightning speed toward the surging shadows. 6 streams of blue light swept around Wu Jian, severing the hands of the shadow that gripped his blade. The pressure on Wu Jian's hand suddenly released. He flung off the severed limb and retreated instantly, only to meet a pair of eyes as luminous as the full moon. "'Tis quite a mess you've made," Zhou Tian remarked, eyeing Wu Jian. "No need to throw your life away while saving others, is there?" Wu Jian was taken aback. He never expected this mysterious, merciless figure to save him, especially after they had just clashed moments ago. "Don't misunderstand. I'm merely curious about this thing. Saving you was just incidental," Zhou Tian shrugged. "Whatever your reasons, thank you." Wu Jian nodded at Zhou Tian. "I owe you one." "No need. Too much trouble," Zhou Tian dismissed. "What now?" Wu Jian surveyed his surroundings, realizing they were densely encircled by figures tainted by the aberrant substance. "I reviewed the data on my way here. That black stuff is called the primordial substance." Zhou Tian continued, "The primordial substance devours all organic matter to replicate itself. When it encounters a living being, it possesses them, maximizing their physical potential. Those are the so-called infected. Those directly infected by the primordial substance leaking from the rift are the first generation, usually rare. Those infected by the replicated substance are second generation, like what we face now. The third generation comes from the offspring of these creatures." Zhou Tian succinctly explained their origins. "They can reproduce." Wu Jian frowned. "Since they devour living bodies, they retain biological activity. Their reproduction is alarmingly fast, and what they spawn is equally bizarre. These second-generation infected aren't at full strength yet. They'll enter a phase of mutual devouring, which is indefinite, meaning they possess limitless potential for growth. Then we'll kill as many as we can here." Wu Jian tightened his grip on his sword. "Don't count on it." Zhou Tian said, "Second-generation infected have another trait. When surrounded by many, they share damage. Unless we kill all of them simultaneously, we're just tickling them. So we can only flee. Pretty much. Then let's run." Without further words, Wu Jian swung his sword again, this time targeting the infected's weakest points. The blade's glow repelled several infected, including the one that had attacked him earlier and had its limbs severed by Zhou Tian. Now it was fully regenerated. Wu Jian didn't linger, he soared into the air. Zhou Tian, though appearing nonchalant, remained highly alert. As Wu Jian struck, he raised his hands, summoning debris and steel from the surroundings into torrents of wreckage that swirled around him, crashing toward the infected and the primordial substance. He was determined not to let his spiritual sense make direct contact with the primordial substance. Spiritual perception was far more acute than physical, nerves reaching straight to the soul. He had no desire for his consciousness to touch such an uncanny entity. The escape was less smooth than anticipated. The still developing second-generation infected and the primordial substance advanced slightly slower than Zhou Tian and Wu Jian, but the complex terrain of the central district forced them to weave around ubiquitous structures, ultimately matching their pace. The surrounding city had been corroded by the primordial substance. The entire downtown was coated in writhing, sinister black liquid. Sporadic screams echoed from every corner, not from the living but from the infected tainted by the substance. "Damn," Wu Jian's tone grew heavy. "There are more and more of them. Normal. You saved many, but countless others have been consumed by the abyss. As the abyss expands, those you saved will likely still meet their end," Zhou Tian said. "So what's the point of our paths differ?" Wu Jian shook his head. Zhou Tian didn't bother to argue further. He could see this man was a stubborn, straight-laced fool. The question now was how to survive. Wu Jian had blocked the abyss to protect weaker evolvers, while Zhou Tian had acted on impulse, a decision he was already regretting. If only I'd hardened my heart and walked away, none of this would have happened, Zhu Tian lamented inwardly. But regret was the most useless emotion, especially as the situation grew dire. The abyss also had a trait: its influence on the human psyche. Its presence exuded immense pressure and fear, and prolonged exposure inflicted severe psychological strain. The abyss creations multiplied, converging into a sky-darkening mass. The space for Zhou Tian and Wu Jian to maneuver shrank rapidly. If this continued, they would be doomed. Wu Jian seemed to search for a proper address. Zhou Tian. Zhou Tian gave his real name. Mr. Zhou Tian. Wu Jian nodded. I'll use all my strength to hold off the abyss. Please seize the chance to escape. Then what was the point of my coming here? Zhou Tian shook his head, ignoring his earlier claim of curiosity about the abyss. You've helped me, and I'm indebted. How could I drag you down? Please don't refuse. Wu Jian's resolve was firm. Relax, it's not that bad yet. Zhou Tian weighed whether to activate his 2.0x amplification. Such a surge in spiritual power would dramatically boost speed, but it wouldn't last long. And did he want to reveal his trump card? The abyss, however, allowed no time for deliberation. A black tendril nearly grazed Zhou Tian's foot. No time to think. If I fall, please go to the North District and inform my brother Wu Xing. Wu Jian halted abruptly, his eyes blazing with a sword-like chill. Enough. Step back, Mr. Zhou Tian. You. Before Wu Jian could finish, he was dumbstruck as moon-white radiance surged from Zhou Tian like a tidal wave colliding with the black abyss, a light that scattered the darkness like moonlight piercing the night. For a moment, the once dominant abyss was forced back by the sudden, overwhelming spiritual force. What are you staring at? Run! Zhou Tian shouted. Wu Jian snapped out of it, sheathed his sword and fled. Under the moon-white spiritual aura, he felt like a fish in water, his speed surging. I can't maintain this state for long, but it's enough to outpace the abyss. When I'm spent, you'll carry me, Zhou Tian. Understood. We're almost at the central district's edge. He'll get you out safely. Wu Jian nodded, his perception of this masked man completely transformed. Zhou Tian and Wu Jian fled like a shooting star. Yet they failed to notice a peculiar humanoid figure at the site where the primordial substance first fell, watching them. Unlike the other infected, this being moved fluidly, devoid of frenzy. It exuded an aura of utter. It had no facial features or hair, as pitch black as the primordial substance itself. A strange galaxy-like ring rotated slowly in place of its face. Though it lacked eyes, it still gazed at the retreating figures of Zhou Tian and Wu Jian. If such a thing as a gaze existed in this world, this one felt as though it originated from the dawn of time. Only after Zhou Tian disappeared into the dense throng of infected at the horizon did it finally turn